Good afternoon. On behalf of Appropriations Chairwoman Maggie McIntosh, welcome to the House Appropriations Committee. This afternoon, we will start off with the virtual voting session. After the voting session, we will go to the virtual bill hearing. A reminder to all the members that we will automatically be transitioning into the bill hearing after the voting session, so there is no need to get off and go onto another link or to go to another panel box. So we will go ahead and get started with the bills for this afternoon with the voting session for House Bill 15. Mr. Weaver, our analyst, if you could please discuss the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So for HB 15, this is a bill for the Governor's Office of Immigrant Affairs by Delegate Pena-Melnick. More about this bill, there are no amendments and the bill was voted favorable in PSA. The bill will create an office designed to provide assistance to immigrants, including a hotline and resources that provide English language instruction. The director of this office will be appointed by the governor and will report to the General Assembly each year.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Are there any questions regarding the bill?
Move to approve.
Actually, we are going to, thank you very much, Delegate Krim. We're actually going to hold this bill for a possibility of any amendments. And to all the members, any amendments on this bill or any other bills need to be in the amendment office by tonight at 5 p.m. So if there are any amendments for any of the bills that are being presented today during the voting session, please have those amendments sent to the office of the amendments by 5 p.m. today. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 114. Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 114 is the Transit Safety and Investment Act from our colleague Delegate Learman. Most of you will recall this bill from last year when it passed the committee and the House, did not proceed in the Senate. I believe it was unanimous out of subcommittee. There are amendments. I think you have the reprint. So just to talk through the reprint, when you're on page 3 of the reprint, page 4 of the reprint, which is page 3 of the bill, there's an amendment to add a program to help business owners affected by the Purple Line construction for 2 years. This is a program we have set aside money for in the past through fencing, but it's not been spent by the governor. It's $1 million a year for 2 fiscal years. This is legislation that our colleague Delegate Wilkins and the Ways and Means Committee has had before, and again, we fenced off money previously. I would just say, as someone whose district includes part of the Purple Line, the delays in the Purple Line are making this even more critical than it otherwise would have been to have a program like this. If you continue scrolling down to page, it's page 3 of the bill, I believe. We require that they report on the state of good repair in the CTP going forward. So that's a particular line item that's reported in the CTP. Right now, you can sort of do a back of the envelope calculation about what state of good repair is for MTA, but it's not clear. It's not clearly stated. So we're going to ask them to start clearly stating that. And of course, the meat of the bill that people are most interested in is page 4 of the bill in the reprint. Has the fiscal years. You'll notice some changes there. For fiscal 23 and fiscal 24, the numbers are higher in the reprint because MTA's current planning and MDOT's current planning is for higher state of good repair funding in those years than the bill originally called for. So the bill is amended to match what MTA plans to invest. For FY 25 through 29, what we've done is we added another year on the end, fiscal year 29, that was not in the bill originally, to sort of reduce the amounts that are necessary in each year to meet the $2 billion state of good repair and enhancement backlog. That is the amendments. Let me just say before we get to any questions or discussion after I move the amendments, this is the Eat Your Vegetables transit bill. This is all transit that we've built already. These are existing lines. This is the existing bus system, the existing light rail, the existing commuter rail system, the existing subway. This is not the expansion program. Don't worry, I have that bill in the back of my mind, but that's not what this is. This is paying to maintain the things that we've already built to keep them running and to keep people safe. So with that, I'd move the amendments.
What was the number again, please?
HB 114.
Okay, I couldn't.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Discussion. On the amendments. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, raise your hand. Amendment passes.
Move the bill as amended.
Second,
Second.
on the bill as amended for House Bill 114. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, raise your hand. Delegate Mangione, Delegate Novotny, Delegate Christ are opposed to House Bill 114.
Mr.
Next, we'll move
Chairman,
on. Yes,
uh,
Delegate Corman.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michelle may be able to advise, but I think there was a bill that was left off the voting list that the subcommittee also considered.
Yeah,
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, this is, it's HB 741. It's the governor's version of the Maryland Environmental Service Reform Act. For the committee's benefit, as a reminder, we took 98% of what the governor wanted and amended it onto a different bill. So the subcommittee voted this unfavorable, and the governor's office is aware of it and understands and appreciates the cooperation on the other bill that incorporated their amendments. So with that, I would move unfavorable.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any opposed? Delegate Mangione, is your hand up? Okay, thank you very much, Delegate Corman. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 850. Delegate Barnes.
All right, there are no amendments to the bill. The fiscal bill that requires in fiscal 22 and 23, the Maryland Corps stipend scholarships be prioritized for nonprofit and government agencies that are doing COVID response. So just makes sense if we're going to do these programs, let's concentrate on some COVID response. That move favorable on the bill.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no, or raise your hand. Great. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 894. Delegate Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to present HB 94. Let me just pull up my folder here. So HB 94, Education Community Colleges Collective Bargaining. We just heard this morning in subcommittee, passed with a 6-4 vote. There are a number of amendments so that the committee knows we've had multiple discussions about this. There have been discussions about amendments. There had been a deal worked out in the Senate that brought the community colleges on board, at least the majority of the association, and they had removed their opposition to the bill. They had originally been in opposition, but they removed that after this deal had been made in the Senate. So we took the amendments from the Senate, and there are a number of them. I'll go through them now. Amendment number 1 is technical and provides for the delayed effective dates for the act. Amendment number 2 establishes delayed implementation for 2 groups for larger community colleges. The effective date is September 1st, 2022. For smaller community colleges, the effective date is September 1st, 2023. It also reduces the bargaining units from 6 to 4. The result is 1 for full-time faculty. Excuse me. Out of those 4 collective bargaining units, 1 is for full-time faculty, 1 for part-time faculty, and then there are 2 set aside for non-exempt faculty. Lastly, the negotiation for wages is delayed until July 1st, 2024. Amendment number 3 establishes an appropriation for Baltimore City community colleges to cover any additional costs arising from collective bargaining negotiations. And amendment number 4 requires the adoption of regulations that are consistent with collective bargaining law under the state personnel and pensions article. This also establishes a delayed effective date for Baltimore City Community College, October 1st, 2024. And move the amendments.
Thank you, Delegate Young, and thank you for chairing the committee on this. Barnes.
Excuse me?
Delegate Barnes, do you have a question on this?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that we, given the number of the amendments and that we hold the bill just until the next voting session so that any other members can get any amendments they have in.
Understood. I'm fine with that.
Vice Chair.
That sounds good. We are going to hold this bill until the appropriate time. If there are any amendments from the committee members, if you could please send them to the amendment office again by 5 p.m. today. Thank you so much to the chairman of personnel, Delegate Pat Young. We appreciate your work and the entire subcommittee on this work. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 904, bridges.
And I'll take
Delegate
this.
Young.
No worries. HB 904 is Delegate Bridges' bill, state personnel, collective bargaining, exclusive representative access to new employees. Essentially, folks will remember, this alters the means of access and circumstances under which an exclusive representative is required to be permitted access to new employees of the state and specific agencies of the state. There was one amendment. The amendment authorizes a new employee together with an exclusive representative to choose to meet by video if public concerns necessitate a virtual meeting if necessary or needed or requested. It also removes employee identification numbers from the notice that the state employer is required to provide to an exclusive representative. Move the amendment.
Move the second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll get
On
my
the
hand
amendment,
up
so this
in a
is for the
minute.
amendment. Delegate Novotny, you're opposed to the amendment?
Oh, this is amendment?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, on the amendment. Say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed to the amendment?
Whoops,
Raise your hand if you're opposed to the amendment.
I'm trying to get it down. I thought I had, there we go.
Okay, so no one is opposed to the amendment. Okay. Is
Okay,
there
move the bill as amended.
on the bill as amended?
Move favorable.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? On the amended bill, opposed. Delegate Beitzel, opposed. Delegate Metzger, opposed. Delegate Grice, opposed. Delegate Novotny, opposed. Delegate McKay, opposed. Delegate Mangione, opposed. Delegate Kittleman, do you have your hand up? Delegate Kittleman, raise your, okay, Delegate Kittleman opposed. Great, that concludes that bill, House Bill 904. Next we'll move to House Bill 905, Delegate Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 905 is the Workforce Development Sequence Scholarships. If you remember, this bill expanded the eligibility for the scholarship to include a Maryland resident or graduate of a Maryland high school who is enrolled directly in a registered apprenticeship program. There are two amendments to this bill. One, the first amendment is technical. The second amendment alters the eligibility to a first-year student who's not receiving federal or student aid or state aid and is enrolled directly in a registered apprenticeship program that partners with a public community college in the state. And that was, the amendments were offered in response to the one letter of opposition that we had. And so with these amendments, there is no more opposition. And so with that, I would ask that we move the amendments.
Is there a second on the amendments?
Second.
On the amendments, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Any opposed on the amendments? Delegate Grice? Are you opposed?
I'm
to
not
the-
opposed to the amendment, but I do have a question after we vote on the amendments.
On the bill as amended. Is there a motion on the bill as amended?
Is there a discussion or do you want to
We need
wait?
a second on it.
Move
Second.
favorable on the bill. Second.
Discussion. Delegate Grice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed that there was an letter of opposition by the Maryland Association of Community Colleges. Did any of these amendments address their concerns at all?
Yes, the amendments were offered to address the concerns. And so in speaking with the member from the community college, we talked about these amendments, and once they were offered, there was no more opposition.
They're fine with it? Okay, very good. Thank you.
On the bill as amended, House Bill 905. Favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, raise your hand. Bill passes. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 922. Delegate Proctor. Delegate Proctor, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 922 is the State Retirement and Pension COVID-19 Special Benefits Bill. This bill clarifies the eligibility for state retirement and pension death benefits when COVID-19 was the cause or contributed to the death of a member. We have one amendment. This amendment clarifies the definition of special death benefits to make it consistent with current law. It also indicates that the application is subject to rebuttable presumption. And it makes technical changes so that anyone who died before the bill was passed can still apply for this benefit. Move the amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All in favor on the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to the amendments? Raise your hand. Seeing none on the bill as amended for House Bill 922. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Yep.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on House Bill 922. Delegate Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only have one question. Is there anywhere, either in the public or private sector, where they treat these benefits the way that if this bill passes, that we'll treat them here in Maryland?
To the Chairwoman of Pensions.
Madam Chairwoman, would you like me to respond?
Okay.
Yeah, anyone can.
Mrs. Chung or the Chairwoman. of
As
Pensions?
counsel to the subcommittee. So the special death benefit is defined throughout the pensions article, and what that is similar to, I think you could make a comparison to an in the line of duty death benefit for, say, like a public safety officer. So it's a separate sort of special death benefit. So there are other types of like general death benefits as well.
Okay, so by definition, though, so if it were any other disease that were out there, say they got pneumonia or the flu or something along those lines, would they be able to collect this benefit?
Not under this bill. I think this bill is specific to COVID-19. And then I think you have to consider that COVID-19 is actually quite a different and unique virus. And I think, from the beginning, when the quarantine was established and we were infected with the coronavirus, I think if you remember, I think the reporting on it was that it was actually an unprecedented disease. So if you make comparisons to like flu or pneumonia, you're not looking at the same types of deaths. I think if you're looking at the impact of what this coronavirus has on the population, and this is not just specific to Maryland, but it is global and across the United States, as well as within our own state, what we're talking about is just an unprecedented number of deaths.
I think the reason why the flu and pneumonia, things like that, are not included typically is because you don't know where you contracted those diseases. No one can really say for sure that they got it while they were on the job and while they were working. So can the same be said here, where somebody could have gone to a family reunion and contracted the disease while they were actually not on the clock? Can the same thing be? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I can offer another example.
Delegate Resnick.
Thank you. So again, not exactly the same condition, but somewhere around 12 years ago, we passed legislature for the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission Police Department. We passed a presumption of Lyme disease. Now, we have no idea, and that's where the presumption comes from. We have no idea where an individual officer may have contracted Lyme disease, whether it was on the job or whether it was out on the weekend picnicking with their kids. But the presumption was because they spend so much time outdoors, if they were to catch Lyme disease, the presumption is they got it through their job and they get the benefit through their employment. So we do have situations where there is a presumption of benefits for a particular illness, whether or not we can directly pinpoint where they got it.
Yeah, and I agree with you in that sense that if it's a correction officer who contracted the disease, more than likely they picked it up while they were working. I presume. Is there so in the cases that we have right now, where we've unfortunately had folks who've died from COVID, former employees, how many, do you know how many, first of all, and maybe what departments they were working in?
Yeah, so that's actually part of the reporting requirement. And in our subcommittee meeting, the agency actually had reached out to some of it hasn't been confirmed, but it's also, the agency has reached out to the labor groups to find out like how many deaths they're looking at. I think at the time, a rough estimate would be about 10. And remember, this is also a survivor benefit. So it's only for people that have survivors. And then second, also, I think just to stick to the bill, that you actually do have to have been at work consistently. So that's
Okay.
the requirements for eligibility.
Oh.
So it's not
that
like someone who's like teleworking from home.
Okay, well, that makes a difference, actually. Thank you.
Yep.
Delegate Mangione.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, June. I think you might have touched on it a little bit with Delegate Rice's question, but so you're saying if somebody were to get a really bad case of the flu in one of these inline, it would not classify for inline duty benefits, or is that what you were saying?
Absolutely, yes, because this bill is specific to COVID-19. And also just a reminder that there is a sunset on the bill too. So it's only effective for this period of 1 year. So it does sunset out.
So I guess, okay, great. No, I appreciate the answer. And so I guess if somebody wanted to, they could do the same thing for the flu. Is that a fair question or not? Does that even make sense?
Yes. So if you recall in our subcommittee meeting, Ann Gothrop, the representative from the agency, she did say that, yes, it does sort of open the door that you could actually have other legislation in the future that would actually maybe apply to a particular disease. But again, I think it's specific to the fact that, you know, it's just the highly contagious nature of coronavirus, of this particular like strain of coronavirus. And that also you have to account for, I'm sure many of you are familiar with just the asymptomatic spread. So I think that what you have to realize is that you can track that a person has contracted the virus. But again, because there's that asymptomatic nature of the spread that even scientists have not figured out. So I think that sort of, you know, is a difficult issue to actually address in general.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions on House Bill 922? The amended bill has been moved and seconded. All in favor of House Bill 922, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, raise your hand on House Bill 922. Okay, thank you very much, Councilor Chung, and also Chairwoman Proctor on the bill. Next, we'll move to House Bill 1238, Delegate Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. HB 1238 would change some of the requirements for the Save for College State Contribution Program. This is a program that started a few years ago to encourage low and middle income families to contribute into 529 plans by giving a state matching contribution to their investments in saving for college. There'd been a lot of abuse detailed attached to this program, and this bill is closing those loopholes so we can preserve the original intent of the program, and the abuse. Thank you.
Is there a motion on the bill? Motion to move the bill?
Move the bill.
Second.
Favorably.
All in favor of House Bill 1238, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Raise your hand. House Bill 1238 passes. Next, go on to House Bill 1336, Delegate Proctor. Chairwoman of Pensions, Chairwoman Proctor, and Council Chung. Okay, we are going to move on. We'll come back to them. We'll move on to House Bill 1053, Delegate Bonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee is well aware and familiar with our state aided institutions under our education funding that get funding every year to do amazing work for the children of our state. Institutions like the Science Center and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. In the last couple of years, we've seen some of these organizations fall out of funding, and we've asked the agency what is the reason for that, because these organizations really come to rely on this funding and have come to rely on this funding for many years. We have not gotten a good answer to that, which prompted me putting in this bill, which essentially says that just for next year, because after that we will then have spending authority, that the institutions that are relying on this funding will know that they will continue to receive the funding. There are two amendments. The amendment number, one amendment that just adds fiscal 20 to it and makes some technical changes. And the fiscal 20 change is just in line with the original intent of the bill to make sure all of our state aid institutions are included in the bill. The bill did pass out of subcommittee unanimously. With that, I will move the bill.
Second.
Second,
Is there a second?
second,
Second.
The amendment has been moved and seconded. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. I'm sorry.
Aye.
aye.
Discussion, sorry. Any discussion on the amendments? Delegate Grice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the fiscal note's $150,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, it kind of assumes that the funding that's been in place would be in place. And that is just because we left some room for the governor to either increase these organizations as he may see fit or to add a new organization. Certainly don't think that these organizations that have been funded year after year are the only organizations that could be eligible or deserving. And so we wanted to leave some latitude there for the governor to add an organization if he saw fit. So that's the.
And this is considered level funding then. I mean, there's a small increase for the
It's
government.
essentially level funding of the existing sort of organizations that we've seen. And you know, you're on the subcommittee, you see these funding every year.
Yep. All right, cool. Thank you.
Delegate Mangione.
Thank you, and sorry if I missed this, but did you say, so I know you said the fiscal note was 150,000, but did these agencies that are getting, or these organizations, the money, are they not eligible to get some of that relief money? Or I'm sorry if I missed that.
They might get relief money. They could, I mean, you know, the organizations that will or will not get relief money, I hope we will have an imprint on this committee. I know that there are talks with the governor now, but we don't want to leave that to chance. And in either case, some of the funding that these organizations get might not be earmarked for this particular program, which is providing an educational opportunity to our students. So we want to make sure that this money that has been flowing into this program continues to flow into this program specifically.
So the governor was giving money to this? Is that, I'm sorry if I
He's been giving money to these organizations, and the governor before him has, and there was a particular organization that he just stopped funding, and we asked them why last year, we asked them why this year. They have not given us an answer. It's the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, for full disclosure. And so there hasn't been a reasonable or rational reason as to why he would just arbitrarily cut this one deserving organization out of the program. And that leads us to think, well, there could be other arbitrary decisions made that just cut organizations out for no given reason, at least. And we just want to make sure as a legislature that we say these organizations are important, this funding is important, the work they do is important, and continue to get it.
Thank you for your answer.
Delegate Grice. Delegate Kittleman.
Thank you. I'm sure that this question has been answered, but I missed it. We are on Bill 13, whatever, right?
1053, delegate.
1053, right. I want to make sure, because was there an amendment that changed the amount of money? It says here that the mandate for fiscal 2023 will be 696,300.
So it's the level funding plus the 150. So the funding amount, this is kind of goes to Delegate Grice's question, which I think was very on point, in that if you kind of take all the funding that had been funded already and put it in a pot, what's the additional amount over and above that this bill will trigger? And that is really, I think, about 150,000. I don't have the note.
Because the fiscal summary says that the general fund expenditures increase by 696,000, et cetera.
It's including the organization that got cut and that additional amount.
Okay, thank you.
The amendments have been moved and properly second on the amendments.
Yeah, just a question, Delegate Barnes, on this. It's for fiscal 2023. Is this funding already in this fiscal 2022 budget?
It's in, except for this one organization.
Except this one organization. But why wouldn't you make it? Oh, you can't make it for 20.
Can't do it for this year. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I understand.
And you know, all of my Fiscal Hawks friends of the committee will be comforted to know that I just did it for 1 year, because after that, the legislature can willfully make our own decisions.
All right, thank you.
The amendments have been properly moved and seconded. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
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 Any opposed, raise your hand. On the bill as amended for House Bill 1053. The motion on the bill.
Move the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Bill. Second.
All in favor of House Bill 1053 as amended, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Raise your hand. Delegate Kittleman? Opposed. Any other opposed? Well, the committee, if we could go back to House Bill 1336. It was Alcohol and Tobacco Commission Executive Director clarification. The Chairwoman of Pensions is back on Zoom. Glad that you're back. And also just want to let you know your Vice Chairman, Tony Bridges, was ready to present the bill for you and had your back.
Thank you, Tony. H Bill 1336, the purpose of this bill is to require that the executive director of the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission be a sworn officer, and that he also be a member of the law enforcement officers' pension system. And we have one amendment, and this amendment provides that the executive director will receive immediate investing in the state retirement system. Move the amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the amendments, are there any discussion? On the amendments for House Bill 1336, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to the amendments? Is there a motion on the bill as amended?
Bill.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Delegate Novotny.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think we covered this in the subcommittee, but when the member is vested, is there a description or an analysis of how much of their salary they're vested for? Like, for example, if you have a TSP or 401k, you're vesting money immediately, or is this after the first year they get half their pay or a percentage of their pay for the rest of their lives? If you could explain that a little.
Well, they get credit for the service that they have already put in to the system. This has nothing to do with 401ks or those type of supplementary retirement plans.
Could you just, I guess, use smaller words and explain it a little better as far as, if they've done 10 years, give me an example, I guess what I'm saying. Good delegate.
If you become the executive director and you have 17 years in the police force, then you will come into that position with 17 years in the retirement system.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Is there any more discussion on House Bill 1336? The amended bill has properly moved and seconded. All in favor of the bill, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to the bill, raise your hand. House Bill 1336 has passed committee. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 1054. Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a bill that passed unanimously out of the Senate Budget and Tax Committee, as well as our subcommittee, which just brings the Maryland School for the Blind pay plan into alignment with really the School for the Deaf to make sure that they can keep providing the substantial services to children in the state. Their funding formula and pay plan had really fallen behind. We did some work with that in Kerwin. This is the next step of that, which I think will kind of finish this up and put them in good stead to become solvent and move forward to continue the work they do. So with that, move favorable.
Move the bill.
For a second.
Second.
Discussion on House Bill 1054. Delegate Grice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there was only one concern in regards to this bill. I voted for it in subcommittee. Is that if we pass this, I believe that it will set a precedent where I guess that the state will be controlling the payroll for a private nonprofit. And so I don't know that our committee or even subcommittees actually talked about that, but
I-
It did come up a little bit in the hearing, as you recall, and the discussion was, look, we looked at all possibilities and how we can really shore up the finances of the School for the Blind, which I think we all, I think we all share that goal here. And we did look at just taking it over as a state agency, and that would be a possibility. But I think if you look at the DLS report and you look at the responses from the School for the Blind, that would be even more cost prohibitive than just tweaking their formula in these ways. So, you're setting precedent maybe, but I do think that if your goal is to make sure that the School for the Blind is solvent and your goal is to sort of be a shepherd of the state's finances, this is the easiest and most cost-effective mechanism to do it.
Is there any more discussion on House Bill 1054? Bill has been moved and properly seconded. All in favor of House Bill 1054, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to House Bill 1054? Raise your hand. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Kittleman. Are there any other nay votes on this bill? House Bill 1054 has passed committee. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 1003. This bill has some errors in the amendment that's being worked on, so we're going to hold this bill until the next voting session. If there are any other amendments out there, please send the amendments to the amendments office by 5 o'clock this evening. Next, we'll move on to
What bill number is that?
House Bill 1003.
Okay, I see. I got another page here. I'm sorry, I missed it. You're going to hold that?
Yes, we're going to hold that
Okay.
to the next voting session. Next is House Bill 236. And Mr. Weaver will be describing this bill, which is jointly assigned to the Health and Government's Operations Committee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for the Maryland Sustainable Buildings Act of 2021 from Delegates Hill and Feldmark. This bill was voted favorable with amendments 20-4 and HGO, and the bill also successfully passed out of the House last year. This bill does require DGS to establish standards for state buildings to conserve energy and minimize bird impacts. And also state buildings would be allowed to meet these standards to the extent practical, according to the bill, and also within their budgetary constraints. There's one amendment from Delegate Saab. His amendment, which passed, allows DGS to consider the mental and physical health of the building's occupants when they develop and update these standards. So essentially, this amendment would give some latitude where DGS could perhaps alter the standards according to the need of that particular building.
Thank you very much.
This is known as the Bird Bill, if I recall.
Is there a second on the amendments? Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
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 Any opposed to House Bill 236 amendments? On the bill as amended, is there a motion?
Move the bill.
Second.
Second.
All in favor of the amended bill for House Bill 236, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to House Bill 236? Delegate Mangione, Delegate Kittleman, Delegate McKay, Delegate Novotny, Delegate Grice, Delegate Metzger. Are there any opposition to this bill? Next, we'll move on to House Bill 507. Mr. Weaver, our counsel, will be discussing the bill, which was also jointly assigned to the Environment and Transportation Committee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So the Clean Water Commerce Act is set to expire this year. So as amended, this bill will extend and update the act to the year 2030. It will require the Department of the Environment to transfer $20 million a year from the Bay Restoration Fund to reduce nutrient and sediment pollution in the Chesapeake Bay. ENT voted this bill favorable with amendments 21-3. And the amendments allow agricultural organizations to seek funding for qualifying projects. They add a representative from the environmental justice community and also make reforestation funding an option for the account. There are a few other smaller additional reporting and funding requirements added as well. I would note that these amendments were sponsored by the Chesapeake Bay Commission with support from the Department of the Environment and the Maryland Farm Bureau. And the Maryland Farm Bureau did testify in support of this bill as amended.
The amendments.
Second.
Amendments have moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the amendments? All in favor, Delegate Mangione, do you have any questions on the amendments?
Yeah, I'm sorry. What was the, you said required members, what was that for? And you said the environmental justice community.
Yeah, what it does is it allows for the administration of the fund, it allows them to seek out a representative from the environmental justice community. There's no deep definition on who that might be, but it gives them the latitude to search for that.
And what would that committee or what be doing? I'm sorry.
They would be assisting in administering the fund and discussing how the fund would be distributed.
Okay, thank you.
For the amendments that on House Bill 507 that has been moved and seconded, all in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to the amendments on House Bill 507? Say no opposition.
Move the
On the
bill.
bill as amended.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? House on the amended bill for House Bill 507? All in favor of House Bill 507 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to the amended bill for House Bill 507, please raise your hand. Delegate Mangione, Delegate Novotny, Delegate Kittleman. That ends the voting session for today. We do have some announcements from our lead counsel, Michelle Lambert. Ms. Lambert?
Whoa.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair?
I'll try this again.
Turn your volume down.
Second.
Delegate McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I would, House Bill 904, I'd like to be recorded in the affirmation. So switch to yay. That's House Bill 904, please.
House Bill 904 for Delegate McKay to yay.
Yes, please. Thank you, sir.
Are there any other vote changes? We will now hear now.
I missed a couple. I was meeting with the speaker and her staff. Is it appropriate at this time to state the favorable for the ones I missed?
We'll check with legal. We have our counsel here with Ms. Lambert, who's going to be providing some announcements, and you could address that question for the.
Yeah,
gentleman.
Delegate Lewis, usually in the committee, if you're not in your seat for voting, you can't be recorded. So unfortunately, we can't make that change.
Okay, no problem.
Delegate Lewis, you'll have the opportunity to vote for these bills in the House chamber when it goes to session. Thank you. Ms. Lambert?
Yeah, I just
Please
wanted to
proceed.
go over what next on Monday looks like for the committee. We will be having a bill hearing at 1 p.m. It's the Speaker's Bill, House Bill 1372, which is the blueprint revisions. That is jointly assigned with Ways and Means. So we'll be doing a joint bill hearing again at 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. There's going to be a hard 3 p.m. stop, so it's not going to be as long as last year. So you can plan for that in your schedule. We will be doing budget report out at 5 p.m. on Monday. Might take some time, so just please prepare your schedule to accommodate that. And then we will possibly have a voting session on Monday as well. So just be flexible on Monday. And then we will
It'd be
do
Monday afternoon, Monday late in the evening.
hasn't been decided yet, but I think the idea is to keep you all, from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. and keep that morning free.
Okay.
Are there any questions for Mrs.
So
Lambert?
you're saying we could possibly be voting on Monday morning?
No, I'm saying the opposite, that we would vote in the afternoon.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Council, Mrs. Lambert? Okay, seeing none, just a last reminder again, for any amendments that need to be submitted for any of the bills, please have those to the amendments office by 5 p.m. today. That ends the virtual voting session for today. We will next move on to the virtual bill hearing. On behalf of Chairwoman, the House Appropriations Committee, Maggie McIntosh, we want to welcome everyone to today's virtual bill hearing on Friday, March 12th, 2021. We have 10 bills which will be presented today. And the first bill that will be presented is House Bill 717, Delegate Guyton, Education Funding, Ending the Digital Divide Act.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and hello and good afternoon to my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee and some of my friends on Ways and Means. Delegate Michelle Guyton for the record from District 42B, and I'm here to present and ask for your consideration of Bill 717, which is Ending the Digital Divide Act of 2021. So we all know that we have been aware that we have educational system inequities and particularly with issues regarding the digital divide. And I will say that in my area of North Baltimore County, digital access is particularly problematic. And that's one reason I'm happy to carry this bill. Unfortunately, with the move to online learning this year, we know that this inequity has only been highlighted in a way that we've never seen before. So according to a survey conducted by Pew Research in April of last year, we know that 43% of low-income students said that during the coronavirus, they were at least somewhat likely to have to do all of their schoolwork on their cell phone. 40% said that they would have to use public Wi-Fi to do their schoolwork. And then 36% said they would not be able to complete their schoolwork at all because they do not have access to a computer or internet. So a lot of counties during the beginning of this pandemic made some significant efforts to meet the most critical needs, but this does not solve the persistent structural problems that created this disparity in the first place. So how do we fix the problem? This legislation aims to provide sustainable, sufficient funding to end the digital divide and to provide the technical support that our students and teachers need. The bill provides $180 of additional funding for technology resources on top of the already $340 that is currently indicated in the per pupil allocation under our current funding formula. Where do we get this number? It was recommended by the APA funding adequacy study, which worked with the current commission during the blueprint deliberations. So this number, which equals $520, will actually be 7% of our current per pupil allocation. And then that 7% will continue going forward as the funding for school actually increases because of the blueprint. So that's the way the bill's written. Some people have questions about where the 7% comes from, and that's what it is. So this legislation requires that each county board use this allocation.
Mute down, please.
Delegate Saab, if you could mute.
Okay.
Sorry, Delegate Guyton.
Okay, use this allocation to do a few things. They must provide laptops and other devices with it. They can use it for internet connectivity. They can use it for technical assistance, and they can use it for information technology software. But it is very important that this additional funding must go towards supplementing and not supplanting other current IT spending allocations. So this is a really important part of this bill. Finally, HB 717 requires that a county board follow all the IT security standards set forth by the Department of Information Technologies as the school system, the counties expand their own IT infrastructure during this funding. So this bill is an important step towards making sure that our teachers and students have the resources that they need for an equitable and productive learning environment. And we know that the need for internet connectivity is not going to end with the end of this pandemic. So for these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 717, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Delegate Guyton, for presenting House Bill 717. This bill has been jointly assigned to Ways and Means, and this afternoon we will have joining us for Ways and Means. We have Delegate Hartman, Delegate Jones, and Delegate Pelovich-Carr, who are also representing Ways and Means today at this hearing. If we could, committee, we'll take favorable testimony from 2 witnesses and then we'll take questions. To the witnesses, if you could please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. First, we have Sean Looney with Comcast providing favorable testimony. Mr. Looney?
Mr. Chair, we don't have Sean Looney or Wesley Watts.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wareheim. We do have also testimony by Ms. Watts, so members can take a look at that testimony in their packets. We will now take questions for the bill sponsor. Delegate Krim is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, do you know if any of the federal money that has been earmarked for education, would that address any of these needs that you've identified in your bill?
Thank you very much for that question, Delegate Crown. That's a great question. As a matter of fact, the money that we expect to be coming in would address much of this, this funding issue that we're dealing with now. As a matter of fact, you may have in your packets a letter of opposition from May. If you don't forget I said that, but I think it did come up in the Senate hearing. But during that hearing, they also recommended, said that they would be willing to withdraw that opposition if we waited until that money actually came in a year or two to put this into effect. So that is where they are expecting a lot of that money to come from.
As a reminder to everyone out there, if they could please mute themselves. The next question we'll take is from Delegate Novotny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think you had mentioned in your testimony that there had to be cybersecurity standards put in place by DoIT throughout the, I believe, school boards and then down to the schools that are using this. Can you explain just a little bit of how that could work? And then the secondary question is, does DoIT currently set standards for the school boards? Because I'm unfamiliar with that.
I don't actually know the answer to that question, but I'll certainly get it back to you.
Okay, I think what you're going to find is no. So that's kind of the problem I'm highlighting, is that the individual school boards do not currently have DoIT pushing down cybersecurity needs. So maybe we can talk offline.
Certainly. Thank you for bringing that up. And if that's a sticking point, I'm sure we can be flexible with some of that. We do want to make sure that as they grow their infrastructure, that they do take into account very seriously the cybersecurity needs of their counties, and that there is some oversight for that with this expanded allocation. I mean, that's
completely agree. Thank you.
Delegate Beitzel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Guyton, there's a provision in the fiscal note that this bill may impose a mandate on a unit of government. Shouldn't that be shall? It appears to me this imposes a mandate.
Yeah, actually, thank you so much for bringing that up. No, it should not be may or shall, actually, because what we're doing is adding state funding on top of already allocated per pupil funding that the counties already have in place. So the money we're talking about at this point would be additional money from the state.
But this doesn't require local government to match or raise any additional money from what they are providing now?
No.
Okay.
We're asking for state money for this $180 per pupil.
Was there any opposition from MACO on this?
Only the opposition that I already mentioned that said, they'd be willing to actually withdraw that opposition when the federal funds came in.
Now, as far as the federal funds, as far as the federal funds are concerned, this will just be pandemic,
sure.
And they're only be coming in for a couple years or whatever. This bill doesn't appear to have a sunset.
It doesn't. The 7% would continue throughout the increase with the additional funding from Kerwin, from the blueprint.
Continuously here for.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Delegate Guy, proceed.
Oh, I'm sorry. And the reason that those numbers are what they are is because that was determined to be the amount that would be necessary over the long term, the sustained amount over the long term, in order to actually make inroads into this problem.
Are there other questions for the bill sponsor for House Bill 717? Again, we want to thank Delegate Hartman, Jones, and Peloply Shakar from Ways and Means for joining us today. Check one last time. Is Mr. Looney or Wesley Watts here?
No, sir, they have not entered the waiting room.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Wareheim.
All right.
That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 717. Have a great day, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next, we'll move on to House Bill 1130. Delegate Barnes, Higher Education For-Profit Institutions Standards for Operation. Delegate Barnes, thank you very much for being here, and please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Appropriations Committee members. For the record, I am Delegate Darrell Barnes here to present on House Bill 1130. House Bill 1130 is simply a supplement to last year's Senate Bill 294 that it was passed into law. In my brief testimony that you all have received, there are four main things I want to touch on regarding House Bill 1130 that highlights why it is fundamentally important that we support this legislation. Being a veteran of the United States Navy and the United States Army, this bill focuses on quality of education and outcomes for veterans. It does not change any of the language from last year's Senate Bill 294. It simply adds a quality test for the institution to pass before subjected to the 90-10 rule. And comparing smaller not for-profit schools to nonprofit community college, there is a distinct gap in graduation rates, particularly for people of color and women. For an example, the Fortis College in Prince George's County has a graduation rate of 67% for first-time full-time students as of 2016-2017 IPEDS data found on College Navigator, while its neighboring Prince George's Community College has a graduation rate of 12% for the same time period. Furthermore, the graduation rate for women in that cohort is 66% at Fortis College and 10% at Prince George's Community College. And the graduation rate for African Americans is 62% at Fortis College and 8% at Prince George's Community College. A few other points to consider. Last year's bill did not take into account the military system that were established in the early 2000s to only allow profit schools to visit an installation at the invitation of that installation. Furthermore, when schools visited those installations, they had to maintain, and return specific records on the individuals they had spoken with. And with the outcome they had been or could become. The vast majority of students who attended these schools in Maryland were people of color, and in some institutions, such as the ones owned and operated by education affiliates, a Maryland company, the schools have very high percentage of students, faculty and staff who are Hispanic and African Americans. And for these reasons, I ask that you support House Bill 1130.
Thank you very much, Delegate Barnes. And this afternoon, we also have testimony from several individuals, and we could hear that favorable testimony first, and then we'll take questions from the committee. First, we have, and as a reminder to all the witnesses, please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. We have Camille Fish from RWL on behalf of education affiliates.
Vice Chair, can we differ the order? We'll have Dr. Cindy Shadow from the Fortis Institution go first, Aaron
Sure.
Schreck from the association second, and I'll go third
Sure, wonderful. Dr. Cindy Shadow from Fortis College Landover Education Affiliates. Dr. Shadow, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and committee members. We appreciate the time that you are giving to us to talk to you about House Bill 1130. As Delegate Barnes mentioned, we are really focused not on changing last year's bill, but on making sure that the quality element of education that the bill purported to be in favor of creating is actually in place. The source of funds that are used by various students in order to achieve their education has zero impact on the quality of education that those students receive. The edits that we've made to this bill do not change anything from last year's bill at all. It's simply a request that you look at factors such as retention, graduation, career placement, credentialing, and cohort default rate in order to determine whether or not an institution is providing quality education. In reviewing the Attorney General's written testimony, we've noticed that the citations that he makes regarding veterans being unfairly treated are for institutions that were either a part of SARA at the time and or have since converted to nonprofit organizations and or are no longer in existence. This bill, as it was currently written last year, without the tests in it that we've put in this year, would be harmful to smaller for-profit schools such as Fortis College, Fortis Institute, and Allstate Career in Baltimore. Our institutions are fully committed to preparing students at any age to go into the career field of their choice, and we do it with a keen focus on making sure that they can be placed in the roles for which they've studied upon graduation. As Delegate Barnes mentioned, and as my written testimony shows, our graduation rates are much higher than the local community college. And even if you add in the transfer rate from community college to a four-year institution, we still have a much higher rate of graduation and a much higher rate of placement. Moreover, we are required to provide placement information and to demonstrate that we have achieved a goal of 70% of our graduates getting placed in the field for which they studied. For this reason, I respectfully submit that you would approve this bill, because we believe that what we're doing is helping people who are interested in getting into careers or changing careers and moving further up on the economic ladder to do so as efficiently and as effectively as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shadow. Next, we have testimony from Aaron Shank, MAACS.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. This is Aaron Shank from the Mid-Atlantic Association of Career Schools. We represent about 100 career and technical colleges located in a couple states, but we have about a dozen schools in Maryland. I'm here in support of House Bill 1130, really for two reasons. One is, to be honest with you, we have significant concerns for the bill that passed last year, that is the current Maryland law. And we think this bill makes great improvements to that bill to make it much, much better. So that's quickly why we support it, but let me get in a little more detail. Our concerns with the existing law is we support measurements of true outcomes. And this is a measure of outcomes that candidly, it doesn't actually measure outcomes. It is a financial calculation based on essentially the income level of a school's students versus their tuition level. In reality, what it does is it actually hurts schools or punishes schools that have lower tuitions and hurts schools and could punish schools that educate more low-income students. It fathers me that there should be a policy that actually incentivizes, or I should say disincentivizes educating low-income students and or keeping tuition down. So it's simply a calculation based off those two factors, nothing more. There's not a single piece of the calculation that looks at academics. And this is what House Bill 1130 does. It actually is now starting to weave in actual true outcome measurements. So that is one of the reasons why we support this bill. As I just feel the quick things is the other reason why we have concerns with existing policy is it only impacts one sector of higher ed, and that is the for-profit sector. There's significant research shows that if the same metric is applied to nonprofits or publics, that many of those institutions would fail the same calculation. So for that reason, we think House Bill 1130 is positive legislation. It does make significant improvements. It would essentially require that schools have to show positive retention rates, graduation rates, job placement rates, and occupational licensure rates, all very easily tracked to the college scorecard. And last, and I'll close up here, just two things. The Attorney General's testimony said that these were the 70% placement rates for the bare minimum for accreditors. That is inaccurate. A lot of accreditors don't even require certain outcome measures. There are regional accreditation, regional accreditors and national accreditors, and a lot of the regional accreditors do not require these level of outcome measurements. So, that said, I'll close up here. I'm just past my 2 minutes. I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shank. Next, we'll go back to Ms. Camille Fesh.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm delighted to be here. For the record, my name is Camille Fesh with RWL, and I'm representing education affiliates, of which Fortis College, Dr. Cindy Shadow, is a part of. Very quickly, to reiterate what has been said, we're really focused on continuing the conversation we had last year on Senate Bill 294. We're interested in putting the focus on quality and outcome of education. We agree with how you feel that we need to make sure that students that are educated in Maryland are educated appropriately and have the ability to pass whatever credentialing exam, if appropriate, in Maryland and be employed in Maryland in a field of their choice, hopefully making more money and living a lot of better life than they did before. A couple of things. First, in response to the Attorney General's letter that was submitted, we appreciate all of that information. However, as Dr. Shadow noted, Mr. Medeo from the AG's office brings up 4 universities and warns of unfair and deceptive recruitment admissions practices on military installations. The military has changed their rules many years ago and requiring strict rules for for-profits to enter military installations and how they interact with potential students on their facilities. In addition, none of these schools are schools that would have been regulated by MHEC. They were all at one point Sarah schools. University of Phoenix still is. Asher University is now a nonprofit, as is Kaplan University, and Education Management Corporation does not exist. The Sarah schools is the state of authorization reciprocity agreement. States apply to their relevant regional education compact, and they agree to deal with distance education offerings of out-of-state Sarah participating institutions in accord with Sarah's national policies, rather than applying the state-specific policies they used prior to joining Sarah. And that's information I pulled from the Sarah website. So if there are schools in Maryland that are working in Maryland that are part of Sarah, perhaps that might be something that the AG's office and other delegates might be interested in looking at, rather than trying to look at the schools, none of which are mentioned here, that are ones that are actually regulated by MHEC that are Maryland schools. Second, bringing to the 70% bare minimum is what is mentioned in the AG letter. That's the graduation retention and placement rate. 70% or close to it is much, much higher than other community colleges. The community colleges in Baltimore County and Prince George's Community College their graduation rates are in the teens. Montgomery College is 21% and University of Maryland Global Campus is 27%. Meanwhile, Fortis Institution in Landover, Maryland has a graduation rate of about 67% to 70%. So we argue that 70% is an acceptable number and much higher standard than the local community colleges and even the nonprofit University of Maryland Global Campus is held to. So with that, we ask for a favorable report. We appreciate your emphasis and effort on making sure that Maryland students receive a quality education and that we measure and regulate the schools based on the educational and success of their students. Thank you, and we are happy to accept any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fash. Are there any questions for the bill sponsor or the favorable witnesses? The gentleman from Baltimore County is recognized. Delegate Mangione.
I'll just be real brief. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize, but did you touch on why did this veterans group say this is bad? Because I don't see why that would be. It sounds like you're doing good things. So I'm just curious as to why they did. I know we had some of this issue last year, but just in 30 seconds, can you tell me?
Can I
Delegate, in the early 2000s, there were some Sarah schools, such as University of Phoenix, the schools at EDMC, that would plot their entry into military installations to try to recruit large numbers of veterans so that they could use up all of their GI Bill money. They were punished for that. Currently, University of Phoenix is no longer permitted to recruit at military installations, and they have a very slim access to veteran students in general. But this bill was meant, to my understanding, the original bill was meant to protect veteran students from having all of their money taken by for-profit institutions. And while we agree with that, that's not what the schools who will be impacted by this bill have been doing. The schools who would be impacted by this bill are not a part of Sarah, and they have to live with the fallout from the schools that did that years ago.
Thank you.
Can I do a real quick follow-up? In my written testimony I submitted, there's actually a study linked in there that was recently done a couple weeks ago by Veterans Group that actually shows that the quote fix to the problem is actually making it worse in terms of the 90-10 that is supposed to help veterans actually hurts them because it takes students' choice away and forces them into programs with lower outcomes. So and that study is built in my testimony. Thank you.
Delegate is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a question about how you can accept federal funds under the current law, maybe Dr. Shadow. So if you're at your max rate, do you turn away veterans at that point? Is accepting federal funds?
We might have to. At any given school, our veterans population is typically 10% or less of our overall population. And if accepting another veteran, we wouldn't necessarily turn the student away, but we might tell the student we can only accept X amount of your veterans money and the rest will have to come from other fund sources, because I can't jeopardize the other 90% of my student population for this smaller percentage of veteran population.
So, for example, if my daughter with the 21st Century Montgomery GI Bill that, obviously I've served 20 years to get, wanted to come to one of your schools, they might not be able to use all of it or percentage of it in the way that it's currently set up?
In the way that it's currently set up, yes, we might have to say we can only accept this amount of Montgomery GI Bill dollars, because if we accept more, we jeopardize our 90-10 standing, and that jeopardizes every other student in the school.
But if they went to University of Maryland, they would most likely be able to accept all of it and probably give them a gold ribbon program to cover everything, right?
Yes, Delegate, that is true.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for this panel from members of the committee? Vice Chairman of the Education and Economic Development Subcommittee, Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just wanted to clarify, the provisions of the bill from last year don't actually take effect, any sort of punitive measures for 3 years, correct?
That is my understanding, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other questions from members of the committee for this panel? Seeing none, we'll next move to the unfavorable testimony from Christopher Madaya with the Office of Attorney General, Maryland Consumer Protection Division. Mr. Madaya, thank you very much for being here. Please proceed when you're ready.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Christopher Madeo from the Consumer Protection Division of the Attorney General's Office. Thank you so much to this committee for your hard work on this issue for many years. First, I want to just say a few people couldn't be here because of the change in the hearing date. Marceline White from MCRC has some written testimony and sends her regards, as well as the folks from the Veterans Education Success Organization, Raymond Curtis, who also submitted written testimony. The bill does alter the law that you all passed last year on a unanimous vote. That bill went into effect in July. Many of the arguments that you're hearing here today are the very same arguments that were brought last year when the bill was presented. And those arguments, of course, were rejected then. This bill unnecessarily exempts schools from compliance with the protections in the law that you passed last year if they can pass these benchmark tests that are put in. So that in effect, they're an off-ramp to the protections that you had put in the bill. There's no need for these exemptions for that law. Schools that offer quality programs at a fair price will be able to obtain the necessary revenue to meet the test from the variety of sources, including employers who will pay for their employees to obtain training, scholarship programs, and some element of students who are able to pay for some of their tuition out of pocket. As I mentioned, or as you heard, and as I did put in my written testimony, the metrics in this bill are simply too low to protect students. For instance, the default rate threshold, right? The number of students who are having in such financial distress, they're defaulting on their loans, is permitted to be up to 25%. Extremely high, far higher than the national average of 9.7%. Third, and the bill is premature. The Maryland Higher Education Commission has not published regulations. No school has been required to even make a report to MHEC to date. And as Delegate Solomon asked, and it is 100% true, there is until 2023 before any sanction could even be applied to any school. Lastly, I'll point out that just in the American Rescue Plan, signed by President Biden just a few days ago, Congress followed Maryland's lead from last year and closed this loophole on a bipartisan vote. Now, that doesn't take effect for a few years, so it's important that Maryland has this law to protect our consumers. However, the congressional law does not include any sort of exemptions or off-ramps, such as the ones being proposed here. So it doesn't make sense for Maryland to pass a law setting a lower bar or retreating from the good policy you passed last year. I ask that you give this bill an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Madeo. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Madeo? Seeing none, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 1130. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 1113, Delegate Weigel, Primary and Secondary Education, Educating Savings Account Program established. Delegate Weigel, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chang. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. It's good to be with you and the honorable members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm pleased to present House Bill 1113 for your consideration. For the record, I am Delegate Weigel. House Bill 1113 establishes educational savings accounts for children in kindergarten through grade 12 for parents who so choose to relieve the local educational authority from the responsibility of educating their child. The bill delineates the responsibilities of the Maryland State Department of Education, the parent of the eligible child, the qualifying school, and the funding mechanism, and directs MSDE to adopt regulations necessary to administer the requirements of the bill. The educational savings accounts may only be utilized for a child whose parent has agreed to relieve the LEA of the responsibility to do so, and any funds not utilized for that specific purpose are returned to the state. The bill establishes an educational savings account funding in two levels, with the family federal poverty level being the determining factor. A family whose income is less than 500% of the FPL would be funded at 25% of the per pupil amount for state and local funding, and at 18.75% for those whose family incomes exceed 500% of the FPL. For 2020, the FPL in the 48 contiguous states for a family of four is $26,200 annually, with 500% being about $131,000 annually. As an example, in Washington County, where the total per pupil funding is $14,289, an ESA would be funded about $3,600 at the 25% level, and about $2,700 at the 18.75% level. As written, the bill includes the student in the enrollment count of the LEA. Let me repeat that. As written, it includes the student in the enrollment count. So looking at it another way, the LEA retains 75% or 81.25%, which is 10,700 or 11,600 in my Washington County example, of the funding without the obligation to educate the child. And if you look at the fiscal note, that's what's driving the high fiscal note. The fact that a school system is being provided additional funding under the bill as written, again, without the obligation to provide an education to that student. So the bill actually tries to take care of both the public school system as well as those who choose not to use the public school system. House Bill 1113 would help to defray the financial burden for those that might choose an alternative educational opportunity for their child, and that's an opportunity that might not otherwise exist. The bill also allows parents to contribute to the educational savings account on a pre-tax basis. Several states have adopted educational savings accounts to empower new learning opportunities for their child. Some of these states have adopted the legislation to assist students with special needs and circumstances to allow these students to excel in specialized environments. I thank you for your time, and I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1113.
Thank you very much, Delegate Weigel. Are there any questions for the bill sponsor, Delegate McKay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems to me, Delegate Weigel, you have come up with a bill that takes care of choice and keeps school systems whole in their funding. Would this be a correct assessment?
You are correct, Delegate. It not only keeps the local school systems whole, but it actually provides them additional funding because those students who are currently enrolled in private schools are not included in their student enrollment numbers.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Delegate McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess it'll be interesting. I see that there's some unfavorables. It'll be interesting to see how unfavorables answer that exact same question, that they're being made whole in the funding, but yet allowing parents and children to embrace school choice. Thank you, Mr. Weigel, for bringing this good bill to our committee today.
Yes. Thank you, Delegate.
Are there any other questions from members of the committee for the bill sponsor? Seeing none to all the members, there's also additional favorable and unfavorable written testimonies in the bill folder. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 1113. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 1076, Delegate Saab, Public Assistance Programs, Data Sharing and Review, Welfare Program Integrity Act of 2021. Delegate Saab, thank you for being here. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Delegate Sid Saab here on behalf of House Bill 1076. House Bill 1076 will codify and strengthen some of Maryland's best practices when it comes to checks and balances within the Department of Human Services. By protecting the current practices, such as regular cross-check eligibility at the point of application and quarterly after that, using the data that the state already has on new hire, wage records, death records, prisoners records, lottery winning, and changes in residency, and increasing transparency. On top of all that, this bill will rapidly and noticeably increase program integrity in Maryland's welfare system. Prior to the hearing, I met with the department to draft some friendly amendments, which will do the following. One, these duties should not be assigned exclusively to the Inspector General. Rather, it should be the responsibility of the department more broadly, allowing them discretion to manage these cross-check systems as they see fit. Two, the program will, with enrollment that should be cross-checked, should be limited to Medicaid and food stamps only. The other programs, family investment, cash welfare, emergency assistance, or energy assistance should be removed. Three, the frequency of the checks should be monthly, not quarterly, except for the tax and wage records. And lastly, it would be nice to have certain data sets spelled out, specifically like death record rather than just the department handling those records. This legislation aims to reduce waste and fraud and protect the state's money for those who truly need it and maintain the program integrity and oversight. I want to thank the committee for allowing me the opportunity to testify, and I urge the body or the committee for a favorable report on House Bill 1076. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Delegate Saab, for presenting this bill. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the bill sponsor? Afternoon, we have joining us favorable with amendment testimony from Teresa Hessler, Foundation for Government Accountability. Ms. Hessler, as a reminder, you have 2 minutes to present your testimony. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Teresa Hessler, and I'm here representing the Foundation for Government Accountability. We are in support of this bill with the sponsors' offered amendments. House Bill 1076 is a practical and principled bill that codifies the current best practices and safeguards to Maryland's welfare program. Right now, Maryland faces a serious crisis. The pandemic and shutdown have created havoc for the Maryland economy and state budget. The bill is principled because it deters, protects, and secures. It deters welfare fraud, it protects benefits for the truly needy, and helps to secure the budget. This is a good time to take stock of what we know. We know that Medicaid enrollment and costs have increased dramatically, leaving Maryland on the precipice of a budget disaster. Maryland's Medicaid program has added hundreds of thousands of enrollees in recent months. As of September 2020, Maryland has over 1.4 million individuals in Medicaid, or about 1 out of every 6 persons. The state must do more than want to prevent waste. It must enact in law the tools to do so. We know that the state's unemployment insurance program is facing similarly significant problems. Fraud and waste threaten the solvency of the state's unemployment trust fund, a problem that has major and long-term impacts on businesses, workers, and taxpayers. Finally, we know that food stamps have never been a more critical lifeline for the truly needy, because so many newly unemployed and struggling Maryland residents rely on the supplemental temporary benefit. It is imperative that the program take every option available to preserve benefits for those who rely on them. Each provision of this legislation helps protect the practices currently in place, ensuring Maryland has money for those in need, not just today, but in future as well. It is for these reasons we request a favorable report on House Bill 1076 with the offered amendments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hessler. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for Ms. Hessler or the bill sponsor? The gentleman from Western Maryland is recognized. Delegate Beitzel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at the fiscal summary here on a fiscal note on this, and it shows that it would cost some additional expenditures to administer this, not a significant amount, but obviously an amount. But it doesn't state what the savings might be with the implementation of this bill. Does either Ms. Hessler or the Delegate Saab have any idea of what kind of savings might be realized by doing this?
If you don't mind, I'll answer that question. Thank you. That's certainly a good point to note. So when we met with the Department of Human Services, they did note that they are doing most of these practices that we've put in the bill, and the point is just to codify it. So I actually think the fiscal note would end up being lower when implemented, but we do not know exactly how many dollars we would be saving moving forward. I think that information would be great.
Thank you.
You're
Are
welcome.
there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee regarding House Bill 1076? Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 1076. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 1101 from our fellow Appropriations Committee member, Delegate Acevedo, Maryland's People's Fund established. Delegate Acevedo, thank you very much for being here. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Appropriations Committee. Good afternoon. For the record, Delegate Acevedo here to present House Bill 1101, which would establish the Maryland People's Fund. And colleagues, in essence, what this bill is trying to get at is an issue that we're seeing in the middle of this pandemic, which is working families are certainly struggling to make ends meet, and the impact that direct cash assistance has had on helping Marylanders and Americans in getting through this pandemic has been hugely impactful. And so House Bill 1101 would in essence establish the Maryland People's Fund as a non-lapsing fund, as in essence, a social wealth fund that is overseen and administered by our state's treasurer. And 25% of the estate tax would be placed or set aside in this fund in order for the state treasurer to do, our state treasurer, Nancy Kopp, to do what she does every single day, which is to invest those state dollars into various portfolios, et cetera, and the proceeds or the earnings from which my hope is that we would be able to pay out a monthly no questions asked universal basic income to, in essence, meet the needs of Marylanders. This concept is quite similar to that in other states, namely Alaska, that has a permanent fund that is funded by its oil reserves. Maryland is not an extractive state. So really we had to think of how we could not just create a fund, but get the kind of a seed money in order to see that growth and hopefully at some point be able to pay out a citizen dividend or a guaranteed income every month to Marylanders, the same way we're doing right now in passing the Relief Act that sort of provided that direct cash assistance so that folks can help make ends meet. And Maryland is really a microcosm of what we're seeing nationally around gross income inequality and stagnant wages. And the whole point of this bill is for us to sort of rethink the idea of universal basic income or guaranteed income, which I would add enjoys support from folks on both the left as well as the right. Folks may know that Dr. King has been and the Poor People's Campaign were and still are, because the Poor People's Campaign exists today, advocating around universal basic income for a very long time. And we also know that President Nixon introduced universal basic income twice in the Congress, and it was the Republican-controlled legislature in Alaska that passed something like this, where now Alaskans over the age of 18, obviously with certain stipulations, gets $500 a month from this permanent fund in order to meet their basic needs. And we see the kind of an impact that that is having, especially in a pandemic. My hope is that we can take a look at this seriously and take a look at ways that we can provide greater relief and direct cash assistance to folks. And by creating the Maryland People's Fund and sort of setting aside 25% of the estate tax. And if you take a look at the fiscal note, you will see that in future years, we're expecting for that to go up. What we are doing is making an investment really in the future and in Marylanders, because what we're doing is putting a dent in poverty, but also giving folks not a handout, but a hand up in order to meet their basic needs. And so with that, colleagues, I urge a favorable report, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Delegate Acevedo. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the bill sponsor? Delegate Novotny.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good delegate, could you tell me where this concept has worked successfully in the past, either here in the United States or around the world?
Sure. The state of Alaska. Alaska has what is called a permanent fund, the Alaska Permanent Fund, and a percentage of their oil revenue is placed in that permanent fund for their state treasurer to invest in various stocks. Pretty much their state treasurer has a responsibility that our state treasurer has, right, to ensure that we're investing Maryland state dollars into various assets, portfolio, et cetera. And so what this would do is not just establish the Maryland People's Fund, but would set aside a percentage of the estate tax, would ensure that the state treasurer not only is able to invest, but administers this fund, right? And whatever proceeds from that, I think we can look at the idea of providing a universal basic income, hopefully of $500 a month, the way Alaska does, right? To folks in order to meet their basic needs. And I'll add that this program is so successful in Alaska, Republican-controlled state, that you see during the pandemic right now, right, where folks are sort of needing that help. Alaskans are now getting $500 a month, right, from their state government, and we see the kind of impact that that is happening, that is having right now in the pandemic. So I would point to Alaska, but there are a number of other local jurisdictions that are piloting this idea, but it's a public-private partnership. Universal basic income works very well at the federal and at the state level, but at the local level, it sort of requires partnership between the public and private sector.
So quick follow on, would you be, if we had oil reserves, would you be pro having oil reserves through Maryland in the concept of what asset does Maryland, or would you suggest Maryland use to create this fund going forward? If I missed that, I apologize.
Yeah, well, I personally do not support fracking. I think there are a lot of environmental ramifications for that. And we may think that there may be some short-term benefits, but there are long-term harm, not just for environment, but our families. And so Maryland is not an extractive state. And that's why I decided to take a look at the estate tax. And if you look at the fiscal and policy note, DLS sort of points out the projections for the estate tax in future fiscal years. And I felt like, you know, that was an appropriate place to look at it, considering that we are not an extractive state. We do not have oil. And even if we did have oil, I'm not sure if that's something that I would support. I'd rather us take a look at our state's tax code. Maryland's tax code is very archaic and regressive. And I think if we were to take a look at it, we'll find a number of ways to fund the priorities that we're talking about right now, to include universal basic income.
Thank you for your answers on this topic.
Thank you, Delegate.
Delegate Beitzel is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a very, you answered, how you doing?
Doing well, Delegate.
You answered part of my question. You used Alaska as an example of the oil revenue and what they're doing up there. And I was going to ask you, you know, since we don't have oil in Maryland, we do have natural gas in Maryland, and natural gas is replacing a lot of oil and is reducing air pollution tremendously. But I think you were one of them that.
Delegate Beitzel, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, back again.
I must have hit the button. So anyway, you use Alaska as an example, and you answered that question because, as you know, you said you didn't support fracking, And the only place in Maryland there would be any fracking is in Western Maryland. And I don't think we have enough natural gas, even if we had the revenue from that in order to support this bill. But I know personally the chairman of the Appropriation Committee in Alaska, and when fracking was developed, and it became that we then became very energy independent because it wasn't really fracking, it was horizontal drilling that allowed us, this nation, to become totally energy independent. But in Alaska, because of that, the price of oil went down so much, they lost almost a third of their revenue. And they already had this program in place in order to get that revenue that they were giving the people, this money that you pointed out in your presentation. But they could not take it away once they got it. And the state was in terrible financial straits and was trying to balance her budget. So they attempted to take this away, or at least they did cut it. But the people that were getting it didn't want to give it up. So if we got into a situation where the funds that you were talking about supporting this changed or did not come through, or we passed a tax to take away the estate tax, and that's, I mean, a bill to take away the estate tax, how would we support the funding under this program?
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing some information about the Alaska program. I mean, it was so popular that a lot of folks were opposed to it being repealed, and it's still around today.
Yeah.
And it's worked successfully, by the way, in sort of putting a huge dent in poverty in Alaska. And that's really my hope with this similar program here in Maryland. Now, if for some reason we don't, let's say, for example, get rid of the estate tax or what have you, I think there are a number of other ways in our tax code for us to find revenue to sort of serve as the seed fund in order to do this. I think there are a lot of areas of our tax code, whether it's, closing certain loopholes, whether it's combined reporting, whether it's looking at the estate and inheritance tax. I think there's a lot for us to look at within our state's tax code. And so I'm open to ideas that will progressively tax, but also ensure that we're funding important programs like this. But I can't say there's one particular measure I'd support. I think there's a good bit that could fund it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate.
Are there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the bill sponsor regarding House Bill 1101? Delegate Novotny is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick question. We've been talking about Alaska and their poverty rate. Do you happen to know if the poverty rate in Alaska is higher or lower than it is in Maryland, by example?
I do not. What I do know is that since they implemented their universal basic income program, that the poverty rate has significantly dropped because Alaska passed this. They were debating it in the 1970s. They passed it, and they started paying out their first dividend to Alaskans in the mid-1980s. So it's been around for a really long time, and it's put a huge dent in poverty in Alaska. And I would venture to say that it will do the same in Maryland if we were to look at a program like this.
No, understandable. I think, according to some quick searches, it looks like Maryland is number 3 in the US for poverty rate being the lowest, number 3 that way. And it looks like Alaska's 13, just in quick Google searches. Could be wrong, but obviously I'm not going to refute the fact that they've gotten better over time. And knowing that Maryland is number 3, I think we're doing really great. I'd rather be number 1.
One of the wealthiest states in the union. And even though we're at number 3 in terms
I think, according to some quick searches, it looks like Maryland is number 3 in the US for poverty
If
rate.
everyone could please mute themselves.
a lot of kickback there. But yeah, I was saying that, Maryland is number 3 in terms of poverty. I think the goal here is to eliminate poverty. It's not to be in any kind of a low ranking when it comes to poverty, but to implement policies that would actually eliminate it, right? Universal basic income is one of the many anti-poverty policies that we can implement so that we can get Maryland from number 3 of the list, right, in terms of poverty, and understand there's poverty and you got child poverty, you know, and it depends on what folks are measuring, but the goal is that, you know, the hope is that we would eliminate it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So has there been any discussion when you were drafting this bill, how many people of income would leave the state if we change some of these laws? Like, has there been any discussion around how many businesses wouldn't want to stay here if we're doing the state tax as you're going into it? Does that force more people to move out of the state so they don't have to pay that estate tax? Have you thought about the reverse, the pro and con of going on, of moving money from one group of people down to another group of people?
Yeah, so this bill, and if you take a look at the fiscal note, delegate, you would see the local effect, there is none, and the small business effect, there is none. This deals directly with our tax code, and the whole goal here is providing relief through universal basic income around this idea. If we look at Alaska, I mean, you know, they didn't see a lot of folks fleeing after the passage of this. In fact, the program was so popular, the Republican-controlled legislature tried to repeal it, right? And it didn't work so well. So I don't see any evidence to suggest that folks will flee the state if we were to look at our state's archaic tax code and try to fund, you know, UBI.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The gentleman from Baltimore County is recognized, Delegate Mangione.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate, for bringing this. And I don't know if it's really a question or a comment or maybe both, but do you think, because talking about the estate tax, it would be fair if somebody was receiving some type of income, or a lot of people receiving income from a fund that is paid for, if you talk about the estate tax, sorry, there's like a background here. The estate tax, which is usually coming from someone, not always the case, but probably 90+% of the case, who worked extremely hard, somehow became very successful, paid the tax across the course of their life. I mean, I don't want to argue the fundamentals of the estate tax, but then that person dies and gets hit again. So so your bill would actually use the money to pay for somebody who's not working, and takes it from somebody who probably worked their entire life, and now is getting hit for a second time. I don't know. Do you see a flaw there? Or I know you're open to other taxes, but
yeah, no, I don't see that. I think we all recognize that, you know, our state's tax code is archaic, and if we're being honest, you know, any kind of a you know, whether it's a tax credit, whether we're looking at any tax or percentage of a tax that we are using for other purpose, really. So for example, the tax credits that we give, whether it's to businesses, corporations, or for instance, when Amazon was looking at moving to Maryland, and Governor Hogan had put forth that over $7 billion incentive package, right? You know, all of those are tax credits that, quite frankly, we as taxpayers will be left holding the bag with. And so what this policy is about is really looking at our archaic tax code and saying, hey, when it comes to estate and inheritance tax, according to the projections that, you know, in future fiscal years it will grow, then we can take a portion of that, set it aside, have our state treasurer invest it, and the proceeds from which we'd be able to pay out a monthly basic income dividend so that folks can meet their basic needs. I think that's a just thing to do, right? When we think of, in totality, all the tax credits and all the
I appreciate it.
that folks get.
I don't want to prolong it. It just sounds, again, to me that it's really double hitting somebody to pay for somebody, and essentially who's not doing anything, and somebody who did a really lot. But I don't want to prolong the, and I appreciate you bringing the bill and discussing. Thank you.
Delegate, that's assuming people aren't doing anything, right? This is not.
But is there a qualification to receive the basic income, or did I miss that part?
Yeah. So and that is something
Like
that
requirement, I
yeah,
should say.
Yeah, so I didn't address that in the bill because I think that comes after the fact. You know, Alaska has certain stipulations in order to get that that dividend, right? You have to be a resident, you know, school, work, etc. Certain stipulations on who gets it, right? I don't think we've reached there as yet. As of right now, we're trying to figure out how we can create this fund, this social wealth fund, how we can find the seed funding, and how we can have our state treasurer administer it. And then what comes back from it, then we can sort of determine, well, who gets what are the stipulations and the parameters for that.
The gentleman, the co-chair of the Economic Stability Committee, Delegate Mike McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, one of the greatest attributes in our country and Maryland to begin with is our safety net. And while we have people that unfortunately from time to time fall upon tough times, we as a society needs to help them out, but for a time. So are you suggesting anything from the safety net be eliminated because we're going to have basic income? So would you be suggesting other parts of the safety net would be not needed anymore if you had a universal basic income?
Yeah, I think this policy is about strengthening the social safety net and not necessarily, something that's in lieu or a replacement of something else. We need a strong safety net in order to eliminate poverty. Poverty requires a number of policies, and UBI is one of them, from the earned income tax credit to UBI to a living wage, right, to the right to a union, to collective bargaining, to childcare. There are a number of policies that would eliminate poverty, and this is one of those policies, and it strengthens the social safety net. And the intent is not to introduce this and to cut other parts of the social safety net, rather let this be one of the policies that help strengthen the social safety net and help folks when they need it the most. I mean, we're talking about the impact of direct cash assistance right now in a pandemic, right? Both of our parties have been discussing about how much do we give people, $2,000, $1,400, $1,500, what amount, right? And at the state level, we just voted on the governor's Relief Act providing direct cash assistance to people. That's a part of it too. That is what this would do. And it is not designed to supplant, but to supplement people's incomes and in order for them to meet their basic needs.
So, right now in Maryland or America, we define not the amount of people that are on the social safety net, but those who have gotten off of it and now living the American dream. So how can we clearly, through data, demonstrate the success if we're just putting a certain amount of people on because they are under a particular threshold? Isn't that counterproductive of living the American dream?
So that's not what universal basic income is about. Universal meaning all of us. Basic meaning, what are or how much does a person need in order to meet their basic needs, and income referring to the amount that we give them. You see in Alaska, right, you get $500 a month, right? We can talk about that right here in Maryland. Do we talk 250? Do we talk 500? But as I said earlier, this isn't designed it's designed to supplement, not supplant folks' incomes. And Maryland is an increasingly expensive place to live in. We know this, right? We all live here. And so the more we can do to put money back into people's pockets, what studies have shown time and again is that when people earn more, they spend more, and they tend to spend those monies in their local communities. So just imagine, Delegate McKay, in your district, if we had an idea like this and folks were having, let's say, for example, $500 a month, that's additional money to put in rent, groceries, etc., that will end up in your community, in your district, and not only help this person, but have a positive effect on the economy as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
The chairman of the Health and Social Services Subcommittee is recognized, Delegate Resnick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two quick questions, just to highlight some of the things that have already been asked. We know that UBI has been tried in various places. You mentioned Alaska specifically. We know that we've had an experiment for this in Stockton, California. a literal experiment where there was a group of people that got it and a group of people that didn't as a control group. We know that it's been tried in Finland and other places. Can you confirm or deny the vast majority of people that have been receiving UBI, were they doing nothing, or did the vast majority of them actually work and have jobs and continue to earn income from employment?
Great question, Delegate. They were all working incomes. They were what you would identify as working poor. So people who are working, but because they're not earning enough or because they're not being paid enough, they're in essence stuck in this cycle of poverty. And so as we saw in Stockton, California, they chose, and it was a group of folks who were in fact working, but were low-wage workers. So yes, and as I said, this is designed to supplement, not supplant income.
And that actually follows into my second question. The vast majority of people who are in our social safety net, they qualify because they are in deep poverty, whether they get TANF funds or SNAP funds or TCA, whatever. They are in deep poverty. The federal poverty line for a family of four, I believe, is somewhere around $24,000 a year for a family of four. If you get out of that income level, if you're just above that poverty line, you don't qualify for any of these social safety nets, but you are still by every functional definition poor. I would hardly classify that as living the American dream if you are out of these social safety net benefits. What exactly would an additional set of income for people who are working, earning an income, but still can't make rent, food, healthcare? What would an additional level of support, whether it's through traditional social safety net programs, UBI, whatever you want to call it, but recognizing that our definition of poverty is abjectly low, what would an additional bump in revenue do for those folks?
You're absolutely right, Delegate. In terms of that additional bump, I mean, this is the choice between folks having a roof over their head, being able to pay for medicine. We know in this country, even though the makers of insulin had really wanted it to be free, it costs so much money in order for folks to be able to purchase it. And so what we're talking about here when we talk about universal basic income is people being able to pay for their medication, pay for housing, pay for food, etc. And that means a lot. And folks are struggling right now. And we're still debating whether to raise the federal minimum wage at $7.25 an hour, despite the 13.5 cumulative inflation, right? This is the reality of the country that we're living in. It's a struggle to live here, and we should be doing as much as we can to give people money so that they not only help themselves and their families, but in turn our communities are added. When people earn more, they spend more, and they tend to spend it in their very own community. Nobody's getting on a flight going to Sacramento to spend that $500, right? You're going down to your local grocery store, to your CVS, to your Rite Aid, to your local store, and you're spending that money right in your community, and you're sustaining jobs.
Thank you. I agree.
The gentleman from Prince George's County is recognized, Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Delegate Severo. The checks that went out last year, originally $600, then we had another round of $600, and the 1.9 trillion that was passed yesterday, signed yesterday, is going to be $1,400 going. Were there stipulations on what people could use that for?
On the, I'm sorry, Delegate, you're referring to the stimulus checks?
Correct.
Whether there are any stipulations on that. I don't believe there were.
No, there weren't. I wonder why wouldn't we put stipulations on it?
I think people have to meet their basic needs. And when we talk about basic needs, that's food, that's shelter, that's transportation, that's a number of things. And when we try to tell poor people in particular what they can and can't do with their money, I mean, surely we could understand how condescending that is. You know, universal basic income is about providing working poor people with agency, right? And to be able to not just use this money, but to meet their basic needs. And that's the goal.
So to some degree, that's also us tacitly acknowledging that we don't know what's best for these folks, but if we give them the resources, they can make the best informed decisions for themselves, correct?
Yep, you know, everybody is an expert on poverty, and you know, we haven't really been listening as much to poor folks, right? You know, a lot of folks talk about poor people without actually speaking to them, and you know, if you look at some of the participants of this program, Delegate Resnick mentioned it earlier with the Stockton program, where they chose a select group of people who, by every measure, you would consider working poor, people who have jobs but aren't earning enough, right? And the kind of an impact that had was absolutely, you know, phenomenal. So again, that's what this is about, is really giving people the agency and allowing them to provide for themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think it was critically important for us to, you know, acknowledge that whether people are poor or not, they know their circumstances best, and we should empower them to make their own choices.
That's right, Delegate.
The gentleman from Western Maryland is recognized. Delegate Bites.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry to come back and another bite at the apple, but I did a little checking, and Alaska funds theirs from a permanent fund that they set up from oil. The tax on the oil revenue comes from the North Slope Alaskan Pipeline. That fund currently has about $64 billion that they use to fund this amount that they give to those people that qualified, basically all Alaskans residents. And the amount they get is $1,600 a year. It's not $500 a month, according to what I have here. So that $1,600 a year is certainly helps everybody, similar to these stimulus checks, but it doesn't provide a subsistence amount. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman
So
from
Delegate, yeah, Delegate Bites. So just one correction. That was, folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. That was changed. This program has been around since they passed it in the late 1970s. They paid it out in the early, started paying out the first dividend in the early 80s. And the number has since changed depending on how successful the fund has been, is what they pay out. So that number has fluctuated. But I also know that the General Assembly wanted to sort of, the Republican controlled legislature wanted to pull back some of that money because I don't know why, but it was a successful program. Folks were really being helped a lot. And I know they've since over the years changed the amount of what they give to Alaskans every single month. So while that may be it now, that's not what it was before, and it's not what it was 5 or 10 years ago. It's always been based on how well the permanent fund and oil revenues are, but also politics.
And you're correct. It was changed earlier, but that's currently what it is. And the reason it's changed is their oil revenues dropped dramatically. They had like a $20 billion budget in Alaska, and they had a $6 billion shortfall, and they had to do some things. But currently, according to the information I have, that fund is $1,600 a year.
Yep.
That the citizens get.
Well, thank God we're not using oil revenue, and we're looking at our state's tax code. And according to the DLS report, when we look at the estate and inheritance tax over the next few fiscal years, we got the money.
Are there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the bill sponsor regarding House Bill 1101? Seeing none, we also have written information from the Maryland Against Poverty in the bill folder. And that concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 1101. Next, we'll move on to two bills, which will be presented by a fellow member of the Appropriations Committee, gentlelady from Anne Arundel County, Delegate Henson. First bill is House Bill 1277, State Personnel Management Systems Office of the Public Defender Placement. Delegate Henson, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do believe this is my first bill before the Appropriations Committee. Thank you, colleagues. Here to present House Bill 1277. This bill would allow the Office of the Public Defender, which is the state's largest at-will employer, to have merit worker protection for our state's public defenders. Under the bill, the OPD would be required to classify assistant public defenders into the professional service category under the state personnel management system. It would also place deputy public defenders in the executive service and district public defenders and management service system, SPMS. In most state governments, employees are not categorized as executive, managerial, professional, and skilled, or employees are categorized, pardon me, in those categories. While executive and managerial employees are at will and serve at the pleasure of appointing authorities, the professional and skilled employees are protected from discipline and termination without cause. And that's what we're seeking to do for our public defenders. Assistant public defenders with the OPD are currently categorized as special appointees, which means they can be terminated at any time and for no reason at all. If they're in the middle of trial, if they're protecting someone's rights, they could be dealing with a case where a person is facing life imprisonment. They could be dealing with a case where they are protecting someone who's been falsely accused, wrongfully convicted, you name it. And at that time, they also have to worry about, is my job secure? Am I working and serving at the pleasure of the person that's appointed me? This legislation attempts to bring the OPD in line with the rest of the state by requiring the state employees who would typically be described as professional, management, or executive service to be categorized as so for the Office of the Public Defender. You're going to hear from a number of witnesses who will testify about the reasons why we need to do this. I will just address one thing that's listed in the fiscal note and in the letter of information from our Office of the Public Defender as well, and from DBM. There is no barrier at law, no prohibition in the Maryland State Personnel and Pension Code that would prohibit us from doing this. It is well within our full authority to bring our public defenders into the worker protection that they deserve. Just a note of personal privilege, when I was an attorney at the Attorney General's office, I was under this same type of classification in this same type of system. And I can let you know that your first and primary duty should always be to your client and the person that's standing next to you in court. You should have your mind focused on representing them and making sure that their interests are fully protected. And I want our public defenders to be in there with a clear mind and a clear conscience and focused on their clients. And that's why I'm sponsoring this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Delegate Henson, for introducing House Bill 1277. As a reminder to all the committee members, if we could keep our questions related to the questions at the topic of the issue at hand, and also to refrain from making statements. We have 8 testimonies that will be provided in favor, and to all those witnesses here today, if you could keep your testimonies limited to 2 minutes. First, we have Denise Gilmore, Ashley, Maryland. Ms. Gilmore, thank you for being here. Please proceed when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Denise Gilmore, and I'm the field director with AFSCME Council 3. Delegate Henson, thank you for introducing this important bill for our members in the Office of the Public Defender. Our written testimony details why assistant public defenders should be converted into the state merit system, including the recommendations from the American Bar Association that clearly state that public defenders should have merit status. You've already heard from many of our members and will today as well on why these merit protections are so important. I'd like to address a few of the arguments from the opposition though. First, HB 1277 only addresses whether these employees deserve to be in a permanent and indefinite probationary status as special appointees, subject, for instance, to being terminated at any time and for no reason, and if they should instead be converted into the merit system. This is not a collective bargaining bill. Second, there are no limitations in current state personnel law that prevent the OPD from continuing to secure high quality candidates and to recruit in law schools or to assign work as the agency deems necessary. Being in the state personnel management system simply places a fair and equitable system for processing these and other personnel actions like training, discipline, leave, transfers, and discharges. Third, the status quo is not working. Assistant public defenders currently have high caseloads, morale is low, and the system that the agency currently uses to hire and promote staff is flawed. Presently, 11 of 12 Maryland District Public Defenders are white. The vast majority of the clients served by the OPD are not. Transparency and defined rules for hirings, firings, and promotions only help to fulfill the agency's mission. HB 1277 provides an urgently needed change for the Office of the Public Defender. When employees live in constant fear that they will be terminated without just cause, it has a detrimental impact on morale and turnover increases, all of which impacts the quality of representation clients are able to receive. Finally, public defenders are the frontline workers in this important and historic moment as we reimagine public safety and justice in our state, and they deserve our support by providing them with the same protections at work that other state employees in their office and across the state government have. An amendment has been proposed to make merit status apply to new hires only. We are opposed to this amendment. Please provide a favorable recommendation to HB 1277. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gilmore. Next, we'll hear from Marcy Johnson, ASME Local 423. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and thank you to Delegate Henson. My name is Marcy Johnson, and I'm here to testify as the president of the Maryland Defenders Union, ASME Local 423. I've been an attorney at the Office of the Public Defender in Baltimore City for 26 years, and I'm asking you to support merit status for our attorneys. Attorneys at the Office of the Public Defender are currently at-will appointees, meaning that we can be fired, demoted, or transferred for any reason or no reason at all. And we lack the protections that the majority of state employees enjoy, including our own non-attorney coworkers and even our boss, Mr. DeWolf. We cannot file grievances or contest decisions made about our employment, and we are not protected if we speak up about workplace concerns, which is legitimately frightening during a pandemic. I've seen firsthand how at-will employment affects us all. Over the past 10 years, employees in our office have been the victims of multiple random firings, transfers, and demotions. These generally come without a warning and always without an explanation. There are usually no provisions made for the continued day-to-day operations in their respective offices, and their coworkers are left floundering in their absence. Over the years, some of my closest friends and colleagues have been victims of these random employment decisions. Amazing lawyers who've given their lives to this profession. And make no mistake, this job is a calling, and people who choose to do it are some of the most dedicated people I've ever known. They should not have to worry about whether tomorrow they'll be out of a job, their pension, their health insurance, with no explanation or redress. At-will employment status is terrible for office morale, which gets worse every year, and it's awful for attorney recruitment and especially retention. Most importantly, it's unfair to our clients who rely on us to represent them zealously, without reservation, with the freedom to exercise the ethics and professional responsibility we are sworn to. We fight for them every day, but we aren't allowed to fight for ourselves. Personally, this is the only job I've ever wanted to do, and I shouldn't have to worry about being fired, demoted, or transferred without cause or recourse. We aren't asking for special treatment. We only ask for the protection that most other state employees enjoy. This bill costs the state nothing, but to us, it means everything.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we'll move on to Ms. Anwar Barwaj.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. My name is Anaga Bharadwaj, and thank you to everybody for your time. I'm a member of ASME Local 423, and I'm an assistant public defender in Montgomery County, Maryland, with the Office of the Public Defender. As Marcy said, this job is a calling. I started dreaming of becoming a public defender in 2013 when I really fully realized the impact of the criminal justice system and the injustices that it heaps on the shoulders of poor people, and especially poor people of color. It took 6 years of hard work for me to get this job. During that time, I had to apply for and complete law school, study for and pass the bar. It was only after I passed all those hurdles that I was able to begin working with our office in January of 2019. I've been with our office for 2 years, and by the time I had been with our office for about 2 months, I had my own regular caseload that I was handling by myself of 25 to 45 cases a week. By the end of my first year, I had handled almost 750 cases for our office, and that's not unique. Most of my coworkers who started out in district court could give you similar numbers. I know that there's an amendment to this bill that would make employees like me who already work with OPD exempt from attaining merit status. But keeping this amendment would not only continue to keep us from having the same protections that other state employees enjoy, it would also fly in the face of the hard work that I've done to prove myself in this job. When I started this job, I had to prove myself fast. By the end of my first year, the public defender had 750 opportunities to ensure that I was an attorney who would represent my clients well and that I would give them the respect that they deserved. I urge you to return a favorable report on HB 1277 without the amendment that would exclude myself and other committed employees like myself from the merit protections that we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll have testimony from Michael Gross, ASME.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Michal Gross, and I'm a member of AFSCME Local 423, the Maryland Defenders Union. I'm also an assistant public defender in Southern Maryland, where I represent youth in juvenile and criminal court. I want to thank Delegate Henson for sponsoring this bill. I didn't come to this job thinking that it would be easy. I became a public defender because I believe in the work that we do, fighting for justice in places where it isn't often seen. But there have been times when I am so overworked that I cannot possibly put up a full fight. There have been times when I've sat in my car at 7 p.m. at night, faced with an impossible decision. Which young client locked up away from home and family do I visit? There have been times where I feel like I can no longer provide adequate representation, let alone the zealous advocacy that my clients deserve. During these times, I can't push back. I can't tell my supervisor that it's too much because I have no job security and I could get fired for complaining or even for testifying here. Because of those impossible situations, I have seen colleagues leave the agency, dedicated public defenders who believe in the work we do, but felt that they had to leave for a job that was more sustainable. Before I started at the Office of the Public Defender, there were 21 lawyers in Southern Maryland. Only 6 of those 21 lawyers are still here. Some moved to other offices around the state, but most left the agency. And with them, we lost institutional knowledge, we lost mentors, and we lost the training that OPD had invested in them. And while OPD has replaced those colleagues with some excellent public defenders, many of those hired after me have also left. Turnover is not good for office morale, and it hurts our clients most. Our clients deserve better, and we deserve better. And that's why I ask you to pass HB 1277 and invest in the future of Maryland's public defenders. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Angie Chu with ASME Local 423. Angie Chu.
I'm here. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Angie Cho. I'm a member of AFSCME Local 423 and a licensed clinical social worker with the Prince George's County Office of the Public Defender, where I've worked for almost 10 years. I'm here to support HB 1277 to convert assistant public defenders to merit status. First, it's the fair and common sense thing to do. Licensed social workers are already merit employees. We're part of the state's professional service employment category because our position requires, quote, knowledge of an advanced type in a field of science or learning, acquired by a course of specialized intellectual instruction and study, and requires a professional license, advanced degree, or both, end quote. This definition applies equally to assistant public defenders. They should be in the same category as we are and deserve the same basic job protections. Second, the status quo has had terrible consequences for office morale. We all knew when we signed up for public defense work that we would be affected by vicarious trauma. What I didn't expect was that my attorney colleagues would shoulder the additional burden of being at will with no job security, sudden firings, losing respected mentors, the constant fear that they could be next. APDs deserve a fair process for discipline and firing. Third, our ethical duties are protected by merit status. Social workers at OPD conduct independent evaluations and follow our code of ethics regardless of outside pressures. Assistant public defenders' obligation is to their clients, not to management, but it's harder for them to navigate those conflicts without the job protections we social workers have. Finally, the pandemic has made it clear that we all need to be able to speak about workplace safety issues without fear of retaliation. Many APDs are afraid to draw too much attention to themselves. They remain silent about their concerns, even at the risk of their own health. This is a compromise no one should have to make. For these reasons, I urge a favorable report on HB 1277. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear testimony from Kalia Woods, ASME. Kalia Woods.
Yes. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Kalia Woods, and I am the non-attorney vice president for AFSCME Local 423. I am an admin aide with the Office of the Public Defender in Prince George's County. I am here to testify on behalf of our core staff members who perform administrative and support roles for the office and our clients. I have been with the agency for 8 years. I, just like our social workers, paralegals, Intake workers and other administrative support staff was hired into the merit system. This means that I can file a grievance if I feel that my rights were violated. It also means that I can only be disciplined or terminated for cause and have the right to pursue due process through the appeal process if that were to occur. This means that when there's a vacancy in one of our core positions, management has to post a position and follow the rules required under the state personnel law for how to conduct the application and selection process. I see absolutely no reason why the attorneys I work with on a daily basis don't also have these same rights and protections. We're all state employees. We all pay into the same state pension system. We receive the same health state benefits. We're all dedicated to the same mission for this agency. We're all under the same management. There would be better morale in all of our offices if we all had the same rights as employees. Please support merit protections for all assistant public defenders. They deserve it just like I deserve it. I beg you for a favorable report to HB 1277. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Woods. Next, we'll hear testimony from Ms. Cheryl Red with ASME Local 423.
Mr. Vice Chair, she was unfortunately unable to accommodate the scheduled change, so she won't be testifying today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gilmore. Next, we'll hear testimony from Ms. Isabel Lippman with ASME.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And members of the committee, good afternoon. And thank you to our sponsor, Delegate Henson. My name is Isabel Lippman, and I'm a member of Maryland Defenders Union, AFSCME Local 423. I've been an attorney with OPD for almost 14 years, and I'm in the Baltimore City Felony Unit. I support House Bill 1277. The people of Maryland employ us to provide zealous, effective representation for our indigent clients. However, as you heard from Ms. Johnson, being at will means we are afraid to speak up about conditions in our agency that affect our representation, and this is bad for our clients. In my office right now, the most pressing issue is excessive caseloads. This was a problem even before COVID, but during the pandemic, our caseloads have exploded. Without trials, we are unable to close cases, but they keep coming in. I have more than 90 felony cases, and I am not alone. This results in real harm to real people. In scrambling to keep up with our cases, we risk missing important things and making harmful errors. Preparation deteriorates. We do not see enough of our detained clients, and our client communication suffers overall. We line attorneys cannot understand our administration's indifference to and inaction on this issue, but we are afraid to protest. We have solutions for dealing with the caseload crisis, but we are worried that our proposals will offend management. When we complain, we are treated with suspicion. At-will employment is incompatible with zealous, effective representation. Merit status will give us the power to finally speak up for our clients. I ask you to support House Bill 1277. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lippman. Now the committee will take questions for the bill sponsor and also the favorable panel. And the gentlelady from Prince George's County is recognized, Delegate Valentina Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sensitive to the fact that it's Friday and late, but this is really my interest. I just want to clarify, if I can, with Ms. Gilmore, what has been the history of public defenders as special appointees?
Sure, yeah, thank you so much, Delegate, for the question. When the Public Defender's Office here in Maryland was formed in the 1970s, it was staffed with contractual, part-time attorneys who had, a private, practice, and then they were, assisting the, Public Defender's Office in addition to that. Over time, staffing in the office has evolved. So today, line attorneys are all, full-time, permanent employees who, are no longer allowed to even pursue private practice. This is their full-time position. So it's very similar to, what we see in other agencies with professional category employees who are permanent status employees. So we very much appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very compelling subject. Thank you.
Delegate Grice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many, is there any data out there how many terminations that there have been over the past 10 years? at will terminations? I just want to see how prevalent this really is.
Off the top of my head, honestly, Delegate Grice, I don't have that information. I know that Public Defender DeWolf sent a letter to employees in the office this morning that indicated that in the last 2 years there were, 2 terminations for cause. I would state that on kind of the flip side. I think there's a fiscal note that suggests that as a result of converting people to merit, it's going to increase all of increase all of the need for additional HR personnel or whatnot. Nothing suggests that converting folks to merit is going to lead to a much higher need in HR. Unless they plan on terminating more people, which we certainly, hope doesn't occur. But the problem is people get let go and, they aren't given an explanation. So, we just really, we don't know, if there is cause or not cause to the termination. We just know that people are being let go. And that doesn't occur for other state employees. For other state employees, there's a reason listed, at least if that, does occur.
Okay, so there were 2 last year. And how many offices are there across the state?
I don't know. Do one of our panelists know that exact number?
I don't know the exact number, but I could say there's an office in every single county. There are some statewide divisions, and some counties have multiple offices.
I think they're 50. I think that's the number. And do you guys know how many employees there are? And you were talking, somebody mentioned turnover. How prevalent or how bad is the turnover for these positions?
Well, I think the first question are how many employees there are. There are about
that this bill will affect. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there are about 425 or so assistant public defenders. I think you maybe add, another 100 or so if you're looking at, deputy or district public defenders. In terms of the second part of that question, I think it varies. I don't know if there is, I think part of the reason that the state personnel management system is so important is that it provides a consistent process and a defined process that's in state law that, both employer and employee, knows how to reasonably, respond and what to do in these personnel transactions. It works for other state agencies. There's certainly no reason it can't work for the public defender's office too.
Okay, so out of the 500 plus.
Delegate Grice, I want to respond to your question. Thank you for the question. When I reached out for some analysis of that nature as well, the total number of employees of personnel was the figure that I was given, was 1,118, and the turnover rate annually that I was given by DLS analysis was 9.92%. So that's about 91 employees each year annually. And I think what the public defenders have said to me is it's not just the actual turnover, it's the fear of the turnover that stifles and impacts and inhibits their ability to effectively perform the work sometime. It's the fear of that's getting in the way. So I don't want to overlook that point.
Yeah, I understand that. And the impacted employees by this bill is a little over 500. I think the number is 521. So out of those 521, 226 of those employees have been there for more than 10 years. 105 have been there for more than 20 years. And then I guess the reason why we're bringing this bill is because of the fear. And I guess my question is, if folks have been working here for, in those positions for so long, I mean, is that fear prevalent, or is it that fear just among a few people? And is it really necessary to have a bill if we're going to address the fears of just a small number of people?
I think the answer to your question is twofold. It's one, that we want to protect the workers, but we can't forget that these are public facing jobs, and the work that they perform, it's making sure that the rights are protected of their clients, and their clients are our constituents and the people of the state of Maryland. So we can't discount the fact that when we protect their rights and it improves the quality of their work, and it gives them the ability to make sure that them as workers, that they have the ability to operate and exercise freely, that improves the quality of the representation that the person standing next to them in court gets. So it's immeasurable in that regard. So I hope that that answers your questions and help you understand the scope of what the bill is intended to do. It's not just the individual worker, but it's also their client that's next to them in court as well.
Okay, my final question is, and no one touched on this either, the difference between at will and merit employees. With merit employees, you have to go, in order for someone to be terminated, you have to go through progressive discipline. Now, I don't know if anyone knows the answer to this, but on average, how long does it take for that progressive discipline to occur before someone's actually terminated for merit employees?
I think that also depends on the level of the discipline. If you have a performance improvement plan and that performance improvement plan has a number of steps, if you're going to seek treatment or counseling, that all depends on the counseling. Some counseling is a 26-week nature and you're counseling. Some is 12 weeks. Some counseling could be 4 weeks. Some could be one session. I think it's really subjective if we're looking at, someone being put on a plan of that nature. And that's just one of the protections that comes with being a merit worker. So that's hard to quantify.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Krim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Delegate, I don't know if you know the answer to this. You've done some research, or Denise, I don't know, you may be the one. But throughout the state personnel system, how many special appointments do we have?
That's an excellent question. I'd love to find the
Okay.
answer. I
All
don't
right.
have that.
Okay, so let me tell you 30 seconds worth of information. Before I was a delegate, I worked for a delegate, and he was very interested in this topic. And we did extensive research, and we ended up with 2 file drawers full of information on all of the special appointments we have in the state personnel system that should be in the merit system. So I think we ought to start here, pass this bill, and then move on to the next office that has special appointments and get them into the merit system, because that's where they belong. So Delegate, do you have any comment on that as I ask my question?
Isn't that so? Thank you, Delegate.
Delegate Acevedo. Delegate Acevedo.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I'm trying to, my camera adjusted it. Great. So thank you so much to all of the panelists who testified. I just have a couple of questions. One being, now I might understand this correctly, that public defenders are working alongside other merit employees, even though they themselves are not merit employees, correct?
That's correct, Delegate.
So it sounds like it's an issue of parity, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Among other things, but yes, it definitely,
Right. But at the heart of it, it's about parity, right? Because we're talking about professionals here, right? So it sounds to me like the public defender is taking care of the public, but who is taking care of the public defender? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think, having a mission to represent, indigent populations in this state, aligns with the values of also making sure that your own workers are, protected from unfair, disciplines or terminations. So, I see a parallel there, but I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of the public defender. So.
I don't know if there are any public defenders that want to chime in, but I'll ask well, I'll allow anyone that wants to chime in from the panel, please, if you can.
I could chime in. I mean, I think that you're absolutely right, that it is an issue of parity. There is there is no one to take care of us, while we take care of the public. And additionally, it's not just an issue of termination, but also an issue of we have no grievance process. If we could be transferred tomorrow, we could be demoted tomorrow, we could be moved to another part of the state tomorrow, and there's no process by which we can complain or grieve. Our immediate supervisor could be unreasonable with us. We have no process. We just want process. We want it to be fair.
Right. And the Office of the Public Defender comes before our committee often around the budget, and I've often asked, what is it that we should be doing in terms of a legislature to support the work that you all are doing? And too often, well, in fact, I don't see any public defenders, actual public defenders in Annapolis testifying, not only sharing their experiences, but what they believe needs to be done in terms of support so that they're able to do their jobs better. Would you say that lack of presence in Annapolis, advocacy presence in Annapolis, is because of a lot of public defenders would like to advocate, but out of fear of, some kind of a blowback, right? Or repercussions for speaking out, that they don't do that? Is that fair?
I think that's fair. Look, our public defenders are no different from a lot of the members that we have across state government, in that it can be really hard to take that turn to advocate for yourself. So we're very proud of these employees for taking that turn and now advocating for themselves. I will say, I've heard a ton of folks talk about, I don't know if I want to put myself out there like that. It could be, potentially, jeopardize my job. And that is, a unique concern that they have for, among state employees advocating for themselves, right? Other state employees are, not, because there's a process that determines how they would become, disciplined or, whatever, it's based on performance, right? It's based on performance, and, that's not necessarily, a process that is afforded to these public defenders. And we see no reason that, they shouldn't be treated like other state employees in that regard.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Delegate Henson, for bringing the bill. Good bill. And as Delegate Prim put it, I think we need to get this done, and then we need to move to other areas of state government where there are special appointee positions. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair.
Delegate Grice is recognized.
Yeah, thank you for the second shot here. Just as a follow-up, but these positions, I'll argue, that are quite different than most other positions in state government, where, with these public defenders, I mean, we literally have folks who have no money, they can't hire their own attorney, and their very future depends on the success of those prosecutors. And to be quite honest, we want to have the best prosecutors that we can possibly find. Because if we don't, then we're going to have a lot of innocent people, being convicted of crimes that they may not necessarily have been convicted of, and what if we have a situation where we have prosecutors that are just cleaning their clocks every single case, they're losing. And there's, every profession has really good people, and there are professions that, they're just not so good. Is anyone concerned at all about a situation like that where, it could take and we already heard it could take anywhere between a month to over a year through progressive discipline in order to replace, those prosecutors who just aren't doing a very good job. And if they're not doing a good job, obviously we know what the consequence of that is. We're going to have a lot of really good people, going to jail or paying out, heavy fines and, for things they probably shouldn't, just because there's a good prosecutor that's a much better prosecutor than they are defender. Is anyone concerned about that?
I would say something to consider under state personnel law is that it's not like merit status in and of itself prohibits an employer from disciplining or terminating a bad employee. Certainly there are grounds for automatic termination, right? If you steal money from the state, if you're, being, engaging in fraud of some sort, like those are, or a misconduct, right? Like those are grounds to terminate an employee automatically. The basic premise behind progressive disciplinary action is that, that you should give employees an opportunity to improve on a performance measure, before you jump to terminating them, right? And it's a helpful and corrective tool, right? More so than a punitive tool. So, I certainly, understand, but, I would just say there's nothing in state personnel and pensions that, prohibits a manager from terminating or disciplining a bad employee. They can very much still do that. It's just there's a transparent and equitable way to go about that, and there's a process.
I would only add to that the public defenders would continue to be hired on a competitive basis, and nothing in the bill would prohibit or inhibit that process. And every public defender that is an attorney, and every attorney has their own ethical obligation and responsibility to be zealous advocates for their clients and to be candid with the court. They have a number of ethical responsibilities that underpin the legal profession. And if any attorney was not upholding those standards, they wouldn't be allowed to be an attorney. So that's something that this bill that you nor I can give to them or take away from them. They've earned that right as an attorney to stand in the courtroom with those letters behind their names. So this bill doesn't touch that obligation, and there would still be that competitive hiring process, which would get us the best and the brightest in the courtroom. Thanks, Delegate, for the question.
Ms. Barr, would you like to respond?
I did want to respond to that last question very briefly. Thank you, Delegate Henson, for your response as well. I hear this concern that Delegate Christ has raised, and it's actually a concern that many of us share. We want our clients to have the best representation possible. That's why we started doing this work, and that's why we work together to represent our clients. But the far bigger issue that we're observing is that really, really talented young attorneys leave our office because this work is not sustainable, because they don't have employment protections, because they cannot raise their voices about the issues that they see at work. And just as an anecdotal example, I started at my office 2 years ago, and I was one of, I believe, 4 or 5 people of color in district court out of a staff of 12. I am only 2 of us are left. Everybody else who fit into that category when I began working has left over the last 2 years. And while we've hired new attorneys during that time, the fact is that because of the circumstances of this work, because of the fact that it is financially, intellectually, and emotionally demanding, people do leave. And employment protections would help retain those talented young public defenders who gave their all to the clients that we all represent. And so, Delegate Christ, I think that your concern is very, very well placed. And I think that passing this bill would actually address that concern, because we would be able to retain talented young attorneys who want to dedicate their lives to this work, and under the current way OPD is run, simply don't feel able to.
Delegate Proctor is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you for bringing us HB 1277. There's a saying, when you know something, you do something. Well, we are hearing about this issue today, and
Delegate Proctor. Delegate Proctor. We'll try to come back to her later. Next, we'll hear unfavorable testimony from the Maryland Office of the Public Defender. We have Paul DeWolf and also Cynthia Knight. When they're both ready, they can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Paul DeWolf. I'm the public defender for the state of Maryland. The Office of the Public Defender is the largest law office in the state, and we take pride in the caliber of our staff and our services. Our agency includes dedicated, passionate attorneys who could earn more money in private practice, but remain with OPD for their entire career, in part because of the opportunities and environment we provide. More than 40%, answer to Delegate Geist's question, more than 40% of our attorneys, 226 to be specific, have been with the agency for over 10 years. Most have started, like myself, as line attorneys and either advanced to a supervisory or other leadership position, or determined that their passion for clients and or litigation would make a managerial role less satisfying for them. Importantly, though, these were individualized decisions that balanced attorney interest, commitment, and skills with the agency and client needs. Because this bill significantly impacts my agency's operations and the majority of our staff, I have carefully reviewed the bill's language. I have conferred with the heads of the department and districts throughout my agency. I have spoken with colleagues in other public defender offices who have encountered similar proposals, and consulted with the Department of Budget and Management on the effect of this proposed legislation. I also reached out to all OPD staff, relaying the concerns in this testimony and in my written testimony. As you likely know, this bill comes from an outspoken segment of passionate and dedicated public defenders who have partnered with AFSCME. At this time, this organization has not been elected as the exclusive representative of any bargaining unit and does not speak for all OPD employees. Equally passionate, dedicated public defenders express their concern about how this change may negatively impact their work and office. Several remain undecided. The leadership throughout our 12 districts and our 5 statewide division share the concerns raised by this testimony, and they are opposed to this legislation. HB 1277 proposes shifting assistant public defenders from appointed to employed, removing at-will employment and placing all staff.
Mr. DeWolf, if you could please summarize, Mr. DeWolf.
Yes, thank you very much. In answer to one of the questions, how many people have been terminated? In the last 3 years, out of 561 employees, 2. In the last 3 years, 2 have been terminated for cause. In the last 10 years, approximately average of 3 per year have been terminated for cause. Thank you for the opportunity to address, and I urge an unfavorable report on this bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeWolf. And we also have Cynthia Knight from your office. Did she want to make any comments?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Cynthia Knight, and I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer for the Maryland Office of the Public Defender. And I'd like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to comment on this bill. OPD proudly employs 561 attorneys, 220 of 6 who have served faithfully more than 10 years, including 105 who have served 20 years or more. OPD is a place where attorneys called to this mission can find a long-term career. Being a public defender is a difficult job with long hours and unique circumstances. House Bill 1277 seeks to place our special appointment attorneys in the merit classification, which I strongly believe is a mistake. It's an effort to solve a problem which simply doesn't exist. There is no basis for a generalized fear of losing one's job because of their at-will status. If you show up daily, do the jobs expected, and meet the standards of your performance evaluations, you have nothing to fear. This is true of any career. In the last 3 years, as Paul mentioned, there have only been 2 terminations, and we've only had 30 terminations over the past 10 years. Administration and human resources do not terminate employees. Employees terminate themselves. Our ethical obligations for objective representation require that attorneys who do not meet constitutional standards be removed from their positions. However, our current disciplinary process is used sparingly. We respect professional judgment, and we conduct written evaluations through the state's PEP program. Converting assistant public defenders to professional service provides merit protections for underperforming attorneys, but it is a demotion and opportunities for our rising stars. Special appointments are not a downgrade from merit positions. They are at-will employees who follow the same hiring and disciplinary appeals processes as executive service and management service positions. They receive all of the benefits provided to employees in the merit system. I am an at-will employee. I have been an at-will employee for my entire 28-year career. AFSCME 423 has not been elected as the exclusive representative of any bargaining unit, and it does not speak for all of OPD employees. They represent only a small percentage of our agency. Currently, we are exempt from collective bargaining. The leadership throughout our agency share the concerns that's raised in my letter,
Thank you, Mrs.
as well
Knight.
as our Board of Trustees.
Thank you. If you could summarize, please.
Yes, our employees are vibrant and passionate, and they excel at the work that they do each day. And for the reasons that I've stated, I respectfully request an unfavorable report on House Bill 1277. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. The committee will now take questions for the unfavorable testimonies. Delegate Krim is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quickly, Mr. DeWolf, are you still on the call?
Yes.
Why do you not want your employees to have the protections of a merit system?
For the same reasons that I indicated in my written testimony, and it's specifically because we're a law firm, as the Attorney General's office is a law firm. And we need to make nimble and quick decisions because of our caseloads and because of the duty to our clients. So if we need to hire someone, we need not go through the merit system process. In order to, if we did go through the merit system process, I guarantee that our caseloads will increase because of the time that it takes to hire someone and the time that it takes to demote or terminate someone from the merit system. We have worked under the system for since 1973, and I have to say, in the last 10 years, we have used the termination sparingly, but it was always to protect clients. People are terminated because they hurt clients. For that reason, and for that reason alone.
Delegate Corman recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Knight, for your testimony and for your service to the state. Something you said, and that's in your written testimony, that I just wanted to key in a little bit. There's no basis for a generalized fear of losing one's job based on at-will status. If you show up daily, do the job as expected, and meet the standards of your performance evaluations, you have nothing to fear. That's true of any career. Administration and human resources do not terminate employees. The employees terminate themselves. I mean, frankly, that sounds to me like we shouldn't have merit system protections for any employee in state government at all based on that testimony. Is that your view?
Thank you for the question. No, that is not my view. I currently manage both systems. I have employees who serve under the merit classification and the special appointment. Our attorneys have a significantly high caseload, and the merit system will not work for this classification. Our attorneys represent over 200,000 cases a year, and we can't be saddled with the rigid, time-consuming hiring processes and endless grievances that come along with the merit process. There are times when you have to go to DBM settlement conferences, OAH settlement conferences, you have to meet with people, and our attorneys are in court. Our supervising attorneys are in court. The time that normally where I can have an office supervisor come and sit and meet with me and we go over the entire process is time away from court, time that's being taken away from representing our clients and giving them the services that they need.
Thank you. And as my colleague from Baltimore County would say, I appreciate that. But you're saying in your testimony, this is true of any career. You obviously manage employees in the merit system, as you've said. So it's not true of any career. I mean, we've decided that there are employees that we put a special process in place for. We don't just say, you have nothing to fear, don't worry about it, you can be at will. We've set up practices. So I just want to be clear. You're saying that there's something so special about these jobs that we can't apply the merit system, but the merit system could apply for other jobs. Is that?
Due to the demands and the constraints on the attorneys, it would make it very difficult. I'm not saying that it couldn't happen, but it would make it very difficult. And it would also impact our quality of hire. Currently, right now, we do extend offers to 2L law students, 3L law students. We would not be able to do that under the merit system because they wouldn't be qualified. They would not have passed the bar and they would not meet the minimum qualifications. We are able to recruit the best in the nation currently right now. We would have to wait for those people to graduate and then potentially be taken away by other employers because we were not able to make the job offers in the manner in which we're doing in our current situation.
Well, certainly 39-year-old Mark Corman wouldn't want to explain to 28-year-old Mark Corman that he was doing anything to disrupt the law school market. So appreciate the testimony. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The gentlelady who is this bill sponsor, Delegate Henson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. DeWolf, for your testimony. It sounds like you did a lot of due diligence to prepare testimony for the committee. You mentioned that you spoke to other attorneys in the office about their position on this bill. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's understood that you are not in favor of the employees having merit worker protection. So if I'm understanding it correct, you approached attorneys in the office who you have the ability to fire for no reason at all, and you asked them to state to you their position on this bill. Do I understand that correct?
No, actually, Delegate, I sent out a letter seeking responses from the letter, and we allowed a link so that people could respond anonymously, and several did. And there was almost an equal number of people that opposed this legislation that supported the legislation who responded anonymously.
Well, thank you for the clarification, because in your testimony, you said that there were some who were undecided about what their thoughts were on it being merit worker protection, and now you're saying that they opposed it. So I'm not sure which one of the responses you received from them. In any event, people who work for the office that you have the ability to fire for any reason or no reason at all, it sounds like you did ask them to disclose what their thoughts and impressions were on receiving merit worker protection. I find that alarming.
Actually, we did. Actually, we did. We did by way of solicitation of responses to a letter. And we allowed anyone who wanted to respond to do so anonymously. And before reaching a decision with the leaders of the Public Defender's Office, we consulted those responses and formulated our position. I hope that clarifies your question, Delegate.
Thank you. I want to ask as well, you mentioned that if the bill were to pass, that there would be backlogs of cases if the bill were to pass. You also mentioned that rarely are attorneys terminated, and that there was, I think you said 2 in the last 3 years, and that in average, and that's the average for you. So I'm not understanding that if the process for terminating an employee were protracted and you're only terminating two employees per year, why that would create a backlog of cases.
Well, I think Ms. Knight can probably answer this better, but the process, not just for terminating, the merit system involves a process of hiring to replace people that leave on their own accord or that are terminated. And that process takes such a long time that when someone leaves, those cases go to another colleague until that person is replaced. And the length of time that it takes to replace that person is substantial and considerable. And for that reason, anyone in one of our local offices, their caseload will necessarily increase, unnecessarily, because of the merit process. That and I guess the point is, like the Attorney General's office that you worked for, this merit system wasn't meant for a law firm. It just wasn't meant for representing clients. As Ms. Knight said, 165,000 clients a year. The merit system wasn't built for a law practice in a law firm like ourselves and like the Attorney General's office that have specific clients.
Then I think it bears further understanding of your turnover rate. I think my good colleague, Delegate Grice, did ask some questions about that, whether the reason for the attorney leaving is due to termination or for some other reason. The attorneys that testified to colleagues that were very good attorneys that didn't find the office a place that was welcoming or a place where they could stay. And then your testimony was that over 40% of the attorneys have been there for 10 years or longer. So if the retention rate is excellent and solid, then I don't think we would have that backlog of cases, unless it is more like the testimony that we've heard from the attorneys, where there is a fair number of attorneys that are not finding a stable place to land there.
Actually, I think Delegate Grice said that the turnover rate for the Public Defender's Office was in the range of 9%. The turnover rate for attorneys in the Public Defender's Office is around 7%, which is considerably lower than other state governments. Our retention practices are better than better than most state government.
Thank you.
7%,
That sounds to me.
7% retention rate.
Thank you.
Turnover rate, I'm sorry. Turnover rate.
Thank you. That sounds like to me that we shouldn't have a backlog of cases based on turnover then. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you to the bill sponsor. Delegate Resnick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Knight, I have a question for you based on something you said. I have to push back a little bit because I need an answer to this. You had said that because of caseload and because of the way you are set up, because of the workload and caseload on an individual attorney, being in the merit system would not, because they have to go to meetings, they have so much work already that being in the merit system makes it difficult. Are you familiar with caseloads at, for example, the Department of Human Services, where social workers have hundreds of kids or families that they are constantly monitoring, or caseloads in the Office of Healthcare Quality, where nurses are reviewing and evaluating dozens, if not hundreds, of healthcare facilities, nursing homes, etc. I find it hard to understand why a caseload in and of itself, and I will predicate this on saying that I'm an attorney, as is Delegate Corman, as is Delegate Henson, and a few other folks on this call too. So we're not completely ignorant of the idea of caseload. How is it that having a caseload in and of itself makes being in a merit system a problem?
I'm going to defer to Ms. Knight because I think she explained it very well.
Thank you, Mr. DeWolf. I was asking Ms. Knight.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for the question. So yes, I am familiar with those other organizations and the caseloads. What I'm referring to is the complications that the merit system would have on our attorneys. There is an immediate need, and I'll give you an example. For example, if Attorney A was a merit employee and had a case, a grievance, let's say they filed a grievance with my office, and we needed to go through everything. On Monday, they had a docket. You've heard our other attorneys say she's had 25 to 40 cases. That is not unusual. If she's a district court attorney and she has those 25 to 40 cases on one docket on one day, those would have to be turned over to someone else who is not prepared to represent those clients, who do not know anything about the case. Those lives would be impacted because we would have attorneys who are unprepared to represent, because they have to come and sit in a meeting or go to a DPM settlement. So it's a complication that we currently don't have right now with the special appointment, because we need that flexibility and that nimbleness, and we don't want to be passing off additional cases to other attorneys last minute because of situations that may arise out of our control. I hope that makes sense.
I find it difficult to believe that, unlike DHS, DJS, MDH, and every other agency in this state, that you cannot schedule a grievance meeting around a case docket, where social workers seem to be perfectly capable of being both in the merit system and handling their caseload. Nurses seem to be perfectly capable of being in the merit system and handling their caseload. I'm just, as somebody who is an attorney and has worked for the past 15 years surrounded by attorneys, I have greater regard for the flexibility of somebody's workday than apparently you do for your offices, because you schedule a meeting, you figure out a time. I don't understand why this is such a difficult concept to get a head around.
Delegate, the merit system has time constraints attached to the processes. There's 30 days, sometimes there's 5 days, and the scheduling and working with judiciary and their caseload and court and judges, and I can't be there, and absences. there's a lot of things that need to be navigated. We can't control who's showing up. So if we have somebody who calls out on the same day that somebody is scheduled to meet, that creates a backlog and a big headache that has to be dealt with immediately. And these are the challenges that we don't currently have and we're asking not to have.
Everybody else seems to be able to figure it out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Valentina Smith. Delegate Valentina Smith, please unmute.
Sorry, mute button gets you every time, doesn't it? Thank you. And I know it's late. And look, Delegate Kresnick, the good delegate from Montgomery County, took a lot of what I was going to press on because we see the budgets of DHS and they have the most needy of children in their caseload. And if we thought at any point, you know, they were not able to do their work because of this, we get a lot more from them because of the protections they have. So I just wanted to agree with what Delegate Resnick was pushing. I was a little, Mr. DeWolf, you said that you conferred with a lot of people and it sounded like you conferred with some other places where they do have public defenders in this system. Is that, am I reading your testimony correct?
I'm sorry, Delegate, that they did not have public defenders?
That they do, that they
Yeah.
underwent these proposals.
Yes.
So there are other places. So is this consistent? This is consistent then with what the ABA would allow and even maybe recommend?
No, most public defense systems in the country are non-union. Some of the, I was recently chair of the National Association for Public Defense, and most systems are at-will employees like us. There are some of the larger cities like New York City and Chicago and LA have unionized and are under a more or less merit system.
I just wanted to make sure, because granted, I read your testimony fast and wanted to clarify that it's not something that's considered unethical or in violation of the ethical guidelines. Your testimony had some cases from the 1960s or something that was confusing me. So it's not unethical and it's not inconsistent with ABA. And in terms of running like a law firm, it seems like the state's attorneys have the state as their client. But your clients are actually the people of Maryland, some of the most vulnerable, the most needy, and the ones that need this constitutional protection. So I see a difference between making an analogy between the state's attorney's office and your office. And much like a law firm, then, do people may not get terminated, but do they get, if they don't take a reassignment to another geographic area, or do they get changed around in the cases or the divisions or the departments that they work in?
In terms of transfer to other jurisdictions, that's largely done on a volunteer basis. If someone wants to transfer to another county because they moved or they have some other reason to transfer, then we'll try to accommodate that through a voluntary process.
Have you not, I just, again, people, we always hear things, so just want to make sure, people that have denied a reassignment have felt like they've suffered repercussions. That's not.
Denied a reassignment. I don't recall people being asked to transfer and being denied. And I guess the problem with the merit system is that if you consider transferring someone because it accommodates their life, and other people wanted to file grievances, then you would get into that whole process of answering grievances for everybody that perhaps wanted the transfer. The biggest problem, though, isn't with termination, in my judgment, with the merit system, but it's really with recruitment. The ability to recruit from 3L, from the best law schools, the ability to recruit nationally, the ability to recruit the best talent rather than using the number system in the merit system is really the biggest drawback of the merit system in terms of running a law office. And I think that's why both the Attorney General's office and the public defender's office, the two largest law firms in the state, were exempted from the merit system.
All right, well, thank you. I just want to clarify that none of the people that testified today obviously would have any repercussions and that they were free and comfortable without judgment, doubt, or anything from your office to come and talk to us today.
And we've communicated that fact to the entire agency.
And I look forward after this to better understanding the partnership track, since you run like a law firm for the attorneys and how they ascend to partnership. So thank you.
There is ascension to supervisory and to leadership. So.
And share in the draw.
It's not the
Thank
same.
you.
Due to technical difficulties earlier, I want to see if Delegate Susie Proctor has another question. Delegate Proctor. Any more questions from the House Appropriations Committee regarding House Bill 1277? Seeing none, that ends the bill hearing for House Bill 1277. The committee will now move to House Bill 1268. Delegate Henson, Legal Education Success Collaborative established. Delegate Henson, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and member of the Appropriations Committee, for the opportunity to present House Bill 1268, Legal Education Success Collaborative, with the intent of securing a favorable vote. That's my hope. The legal profession is one of our least diverse professions in the country. In 2007, 4% of active attorneys identified as African American or Hispanic, respectively, 4% for each category. 10 years later, in 2017, same survey showed that it rose only slightly by 1%, and 5% for each category identified as African American or Hispanic, respectively. The population who defends our rights is not reflectively diverse as the country. The core cause of that is probably for a number of reasons: restrictive pipelines for minority students to get into law schools, high cost of law school tuition and wealth disparities, a lack of minority representation in the law field that would act as an inspiration for the next generation to want to enter the legal profession. Well, House Bill 1268, it works to build on resolving some of those barriers that are entries to the legal profession for the diversity that we would seek to balance and achieve. Under a program that was started at Maryland's historically Black colleges and universities in a collaboration with our law schools here in the University of Maryland and the University of Baltimore, there has been a partnership which mentors and supports students who are interested in attending law school. We know that nationally, our HBCUs account for 80% of Black judges, that 50% of Black lawyers and doctors went to HBCUs, and 25% of our STEM professionals that are Black are also HBCU graduates. We know that our HBCUs are not just institutions for Black students, but they are open to all and provide quality, robust academic education and social growth and support. In 2018, non-Black students made up 24% of enrollment at HBCUs, and that grew from 15% in the year 1976. So how does this bill work to achieve those goals and weave together those different processes? It enables Maryland's two law schools, University of Baltimore and University of Maryland, to continue that collaboration that they started privately. And it would work with Maryland's 4 HBCUs, Morgan State, Bowie State, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and the Coppin State University, my alma mater. And they would have professors from the University of Baltimore and University of Maryland law schools that would work with students at the HBCUs to provide professional development, mentoring, and help them on their pathway towards entering law school, and even after they have entered into law school. The bill's appropriation would be for $125,000 to each institution. With an amendment to the bill, the institution would provide a matching grant for that appropriation that's provided by the state. I want to note that this money had been provided previously by the Angelos family in a private grant to our law schools. The Angelos family is no longer able to provide that grant, but what we can do at the state of Maryland is step in and provide that resource to continue this program, which has been very successful, seeing 120 students able to attend law school with the support and professional guidance of law professors. I thank the committee for your time, and I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1268. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Delegate Henson, for presenting House Bill 1268. We have 5 witnesses who are providing favorable testimony. We'll hear those testimonies, and then we'll take questions from the committee. To the witnesses, if you could limit your testimony to 2 minutes. First, we have Dean Donald Tobin, University of Maryland, Carey School of Law. Dean Tobin, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Donald Tobin from Maryland Law School. We're so pleased to be here and join Delegate Henson and my colleagues in strong support of HB 1268. This is a critical time in our country. And I think as this body knows, we're seeing now more than ever why we need diverse lawyers in our society who will serve all the segments of society. At Maryland, we're proud to be the #1 school for the top 50 schools in the country for African-American enrollment. And I congratulate UB on being rated one of the top schools in the nation for African-Americans. We both work hard to recruit, educate, and retain a diverse student body. I want to tell you a little bit about our diversity initiative. Our program currently has 8 law firms and business partners who work together to provide financial support, mentoring, and academic achievement for our students. The students are able to see what it's like to be in the profession and also to have goals about what they can attain. Today, you're going to hear from one of our most recent scholars, Randall Ainsworth, who is a shining example of what we're trying to accomplish. He's a diversity scholar and our first Elijah Cummings scholar. He's from Baltimore, attended UMBC, worked here in Annapolis, and was heavily recruited by law schools. In fact, he just won the Best Advocate Award in the Constant Baker Motley Mock Trial competition. We're failing as a profession to recruit and retain African-American students. We're working hard. True justice in our society requires that all members of our society feel a sense of belonging, that the legal system is not stacked against them, and that justice is not for a chosen few. A legal profession that looks more like our citizenry is important for promoting justice. HB 1268 helps us achieve that, and therefore I strongly urge the committee to provide a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean Tobin. Next, we'll hear from Ronald Welch, University of Baltimore School of Law. Mr. Welch, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ronald Weich, and I'm the Dean of the University of Baltimore School of Law. Very pleased to join Delegate Henson, Senator McCray, and the other body, my good colleague and friend, Dean Tobin from the University of Maryland, and others in support of this important initiative. Delegate Henson did a great job of describing the University of Baltimore's pipeline program, the so-called Fanny Angelos program, and Dean Tobin did a fine job of explaining the overall need for enhancing and maintaining diversity in the legal profession here in Maryland. We're extremely proud of the work of our Fanny Angelos program. It's this unique partnership with the historically Black colleges here in our state, and it's been recognized by the American Bar Association with the prestigious Diversity Leadership Award. But it's very important and useful for the state to step in and support this program, which is no longer supported by private funds, because we need to strengthen and grow the program to better serve the students from the historically Black colleges who want to serve the public as lawyers and to serve the public itself by enhancing diversity. Maryland would not be the first state to support an initiative like this. California has appropriated $4.5 million a year for historically Black colleges to attend the Hastings College of Law in San Francisco. So Maryland would be following in that state's excellent example were you to pass this bill. I strongly urge support for House Bill 1268. The University of Baltimore graduate who was to testify may have dropped off because of professional obligations. I'm not sure if Vernon Brownlee is on. If not, I apologize. And of course, he has written testimony that I would ask be included in the record.
Thank you very much, Dean Weich, for being here. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Steve Waddy, NAACP.
Hello, Vice Chair Chang. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. You do have a University of Baltimore graduate here.
All right. Great.
Good afternoon. You all have the NAACP's testimony for this bill. I want to talk to you all from my perspective. I am somewhat of a unicorn, a Black male that graduated from the day program at the University of Baltimore's Law School. There's only 2 of us that entered in 2008. I'm from Columbia, Maryland. I'm not from Baltimore. I went to Clarksville Middle School in the suburbs and Atherton High School before going to Winston-Salem State at HBCU. I love my HBCU. I'm an HBCU graduate. I come from a family of HBCU graduates. I'm the child of HBCU graduates from Morgan State. My great-grandfather graduated from Lincoln University and helped found the NAACP. His name is Garnett Waller. My family members have all graduated from Oregon State, Bowie State, and the Coppin State University. I have seen my parents' alumni network from Oregon State help provide me and my family with an upper middle class lifestyle in the wilds of Columbia. My uncle, Freddie Scott, was the first Black person to be admitted to and graduate from Johns Hopkins University. He was alone for much of his college education. Although we had several Black women in our day program, after attending University of Baltimore, I understand my Uncle Freddie's plight a little bit more. Although I had been one of 7 Black students at Clarksville Middle School in Columbia, my experience at the University of Baltimore between 2009 and 2011 was as one of 2 Black men in the full-time day program. How did I know that there was another Black man in the day program? We've been friends ever since I met him. Malcolm and I met in August of 2008 when the entire class of 200 some odd students in the entry class of 2008 lined up outside of the old UB Law building, waiting to enter an auditorium in Bogomolny Library for our initiation into University of Baltimore. If you can imagine, it's not hard to find the one other Black guy. I support this bill because the University of Baltimore needs to diversify its student population. You all see the benefit of strength in numbers. I don't want one Black male student sitting alone in a con law class where the Federalist Society is teaching the class and their proteges are sitting in class. I don't want one Black male student bearing the weight of arguing for affirmative action in a class full of 90 white students. We don't want one Black male student sitting in a property class being taught by a lawyer for developers that ignores the effects of gentrification on the Black community. Much of the population issues in our law schools are a result of quotas implemented.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. If you could please summarize. Thank you. If you could summarize.
Sure. We must increase the number of Black students at every graduate level historically white institution in Maryland, and we urge a favorable report on this bill. Thanks, Delegate Chang.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waddy. Next, we'll hear testimony from Randall Ainsworth, University of Maryland, Francis Terry School of Law.
Thank you, members of the committee. So I'll try to be brief. So I am the Elijah Cummings Scholar, and I wanted to tell you about my life. So I was born and raised here in Baltimore, and I was always told that I was born with 3 strikes against me. I was Black, I was from a single parent home, and I was poor. I always had to strive to be better in order to level the playing field. Growing up, I had a lot of hardships. In high school, I was homeless. I had to find places to complete assignments because I didn't have electricity. In the wintertime, it was difficult because there wasn't much daylight. It felt like a symbolism, for my life. One of the memories that sticks out to me is when I ran for high school student government. And I was told that the deciding factor was that the other candidate's father was a judge. And that made me feel that he was more valuable to the school. It made me feel that he was more valuable, honestly, than I was. And that was one of those 3 strikes. His father was present, and that was a second strike that I was born with against me. I'm telling you this because my story is very similar to others in the city. They're bright, they're capable and eager, but they have those same strikes against them. They don't have parents that are judges. They don't have money to fix their problems. And this scholarship is an avenue to level the playing field. It's given me an opportunity to go to the best school in Maryland, to be the best advocate in the country, even better than Harvard 3rd-year students, and an opportunity to have relationships with like-minded individuals. There are kids right here in the community that need hope, a chance to be redeemers of their bloodlines and to change the dynamics of their family. Without these scholarships, they won't have an opportunity to reach their potential, and many of them will stop dreaming. I'm an agent of change, and there are others like me, and this scholarship will help others have an opportunity to succeed as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ainsworth, for your testimony. Vernon Brownlee, University of Baltimore.
Mr. Chair, as I said, I believe Mr. Brownlee had to drop off the Zoom because of
Thank you very much,
client
Dean.
commitments.
Send him our regards, please. The committee will now take questions for the bill sponsor and also the witnesses. Are there any questions from members of the committee regarding House Bill 1268? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 12. The committee will now move on to House Bill 935. Delegate Bartlett, Emergency Community Services Fund. Delegate Bartlett, thank you very much for being here. Please proceed when you're ready. Delegate Bartlett. House Bill 935, Delegate Bartlett.
The good delegate is in the room.
Delegate Bartlett.
Chair. My apologies. I am having to leave another meeting. We were having our judiciary vote. My apologies. Thank you. I welcome the privilege of introducing House Bill 935. This bill establishes an emergency community services fund that will be administered by the Department of Budget and Management. And you will see a letter from the department, and I will address that in just a moment. So the purpose of the bill is to allocate each year in the budget $10 million that will be used and must be used for community services that provide food, nutrition assistance programs, rental assistance for residential tenants, and energy assistant programs. For instance, many of us have a 6 to 8 month or maybe a 12-month emergency fund, but we may also have a holiday fund. So that emergency fund is for the really big problems that are just, they can go in any way. Your furnace can break down, your car can break down, anything can happen, but you may not necessarily touch that money that is reserved for your holiday fund. Bad analogy, but that's the best I can do. I'm from Judiciary Committee. So but my point is really simple. The purpose is to be sure that we do not have a delay when it comes to providing people with the basics that they need to be able to survive. We already have nonprofits who do business or who work with the state who have already been vetted. Those nonprofits or those businesses that have already been vetted will be the ones who will distribute, who will receive this extra funding when there is a case of an emergency or the trigger of a severe case of unemployment. And so this would happen without any delay, and it would help those nonprofits who have actually had quite a dip in revenue because there has been a dip in philanthropic donations due to the pandemic. So when we're in this situation, similar to how, as we are now, 10 million was not enough. We found out it was not enough. We needed even more, but it would be a start until other revenue came from either the federal government or from other sources. So with that said, Mr. Chair, that concludes my testimony, and thank you for the opportunity to testify in front of Appropriations for the very first time.
Wonderful. Thank you very much to the bill sponsor for presenting the bill. We have testimony from 3 witnesses today, and we're going to hear those testimonies. And to the witnesses, if you could limit your testimony to 2 minutes, and then we will take questions. First, we have Ashley Maples, Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition. Ms. Maples, thank you for being here, and please proceed when you're ready.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Ashley Maples, and I'm here today with the Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition. MCRC is a statewide coalition of individuals and organizations that advance financial inclusion and economic justice for Maryland consumers through research, education, direct service, and advocacy. We are here today in strong support of HB 935. HB 935 is urgently needed to address the heightened need for social services during the COVID-19 pandemic and future states of emergency. Our current state of emergency has caused the need for eviction prevention services, access to food, and support of basic needs to skyrocket, which has been reflected in our work at MCRC. Our tenant assistance program has seen a 305% increase in clients from 2019 And our SOAR program, which assists older adults in applying for benefits and tax credits and provides financial counseling, has seen a 250% increase in demand for services without additional support. Through my work with the SOAR program, I can attest not only to the need for additional support for our social service organizations, but also to a need for strengthening our Department of Social Services during a state of emergency. The high demand for social services has only been met by a delay in our government getting needed benefits to its constituents. A client of mine, a 55-year-old disabled Black man from Baltimore County, was approved for SNAP benefits in November. He has still not gotten his EBT card and is currently struggling to afford food. Having exhausted every avenue to resolve this issue, he is now pursuing the option of contacting his state and county representatives to see if they may help him find an answer so he can get his EBT card. I have also noted a marked delay in hearing back from other nonprofit organizations for referral services they provide, presumably due to their own overwhelming increase in caseload and lack of support. Therefore, as the General Assembly moves forward to increase support for legal service organizations, they need to also increase support for all of the organizations that are doing the work that bolsters and complements the legal service providers' efforts. Thank you very much for your time, and please consider supporting this bill with a favorable report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maples. Next, we hear from Laurie Taylor Mitchell, Student Support Network President. Madam President, thank you for being here. Please proceed when you're ready. If you could unmute yourself, Madam President.
Yes, here we go. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Laurie Taylor Mitchell, President of the Student Support Network in Baltimore County, a nonprofit organization serving students living in poverty who attend Baltimore County Public Schools. Thank you for this opportunity to present favorable testimony on HB 935 to establish an emergency community services fund. Given the tremendous need and suffering endured by families in poverty since the beginning of the current pandemic, it is essential to have funds that are rapidly available following a declaration of a state of emergency by the governor. In our experience, the most immediate needs are food and essential household supplies such as soap, toilet paper, and diapers. We desperately need a statewide structure to organize the purchase and distribution of food and essential supplies during emergency situations that can last for months, such as the current crisis. An important feature of HB 935 is that the Department of Budget and Management would administer the fund, not the governor. This fiscal independence would facilitate rapid support for the immediate needs of our most vulnerable citizens, but the bill also gives the governor flexibility to add funding to the specified community services, namely food, rental assistance, and energy assistance. In times of emergency, especially for children, the prevention of hunger and homelessness are paramount. Hungry children cannot learn, and the recent research on the effects of homelessness on children is clear. Homelessness is a catastrophic event, an event that can set children behind for years academically, let alone the mental health consequences of losing housing stability. In conclusion, I strongly support HB 935 and hope that the legislature will be open to adding supplemental funding after it is established to help alleviate and prevent economic hardship and trauma by having these emergency funds available without delay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Erin Karpowitz, Arundel Community Development Services Incorporated. Ms. Karpowitz.
Hi, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Appropriation Committee. I'm Erin Karpowitz, and I'm with the county's Housing and Community Development Agency. I'm here to say that we fully support House Bill 935, as we know how critical it can be to have flexible funding to address the basic food and shelter needs of our family or of our community at the onset of a major emergency. Early on in the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw long lines at food pantries, and we had distressed people who called our office. They had lost their income, they couldn't afford to pay for their rent, they weren't getting their social or their unemployment benefits right away. We worked with our county executive and our local development council, of which Delegate Chang and Delegate Bartlett are part of. And they were able to help us reprogram some of that local development council money, which is the casino impact money, just a small amount. And we were able to reprogram it and direct it to provide food assistance and contract with the Maryland Food Bank and get resources into the community right away and address some of those needs. And that critical funding was so important. We were also able to work to stand up the state's first eviction prevention program with a little bit of seed money and get that running as early as April. But it wasn't enough, and those early programs were critical as people waited for the unemployment checks to come through, and we waited for the federal aid to be dispersed. And then we were able to add on to that, leveraging the early investments, which started with those flexible funds. It's allowed us to get our infrastructure in place. And we've now been able to serve over 6 million meals to families throughout the county and make over 1,300 rental assistance payments. But that early little bit of funding, and again, it was just limited to that certain area, it was crucial. We need more flexible funding like that in Anne Arundel County and across the state now and in the future, because there will probably, unfortunately, be future emergencies. We need to be able to get people basic resources early on: food, housing, utility assistance, especially for those vulnerable families. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Horowitz. Are there any questions from members of the House Appropriations Committee to the bill sponsor or to the witnesses regarding House Bill 935? I have a question. This is for the president of the Student Support Network. It's the committee's understanding that there's a member of this committee who has been serving families since the beginning of the pandemic and who was recently honored her work. Could you tell us about who that person is?
I believe that's Delegate Kathy Forbes. Is that correct? Yes. Kathy Forbes was instrumental in developing one of our major food distribution sites in Baltimore County at a school, a middle school. For weeks and weeks, she was the site coordinator. That means she handled everything at the site, the hundreds of boxes of food and toiletries and all of the volunteers that came. And she created an incredible atmosphere, I think, of welcoming and just a radiant joy that she passed on to all of the volunteers and also to the families coming. I mean, one has to remember those lines, people waiting for 2 hours at a time to get a box of food and some diapers. But everyone there, I think, felt spiritually, as much as one could be possibly spiritually nourished and welcomed by Kathy and the volunteers that she put together and helped sustain at that site. We miss her very much, although we understand, her, she had to move to Annapolis, but we hope that we will see her again. And again, I cannot say enough about the wonderful things that she accomplished for the network and for the most vulnerable in Baltimore County. Hundreds and hundreds of people every week that came to that site and still do. So thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Lori Taylor Mitchell, Dr. Taylor Mitchell, for those kind words. And thank you, Delegate Bartlett, for bringing this bill. It's really important that we have this money accessible easily in the case of an emergency. Dr. Taylor Mitchell will tell you that we were collecting canned goods on like my front porch and bagging them for people because we were so desperate to get food out to people because there were people in so much need. Additionally, we know that the unemployment didn't come through for people for weeks and weeks. And so whatever we could do to get people fed, it was really a crucial time. So I thank you, Delegate Bartlett, for bringing this bill. And I thank you for the people that have spoken today in support of it.
Thank you for your leadership, Delegate Forbes. We really appreciate it. Are there any other questions from members of the House Appropriations Committee regarding House Bill 935? Thank you very much to the bill sponsor and to all the ladies for being here. We really appreciate it. Have a great day. Next, we'll move on to House Bill 1310, Delegate Rosenberg, Clean Energy and Energy Efficiency Investment in Low-Income Communities. Delegate Rosenberg, thank you very much for being here. Please proceed when you're ready. Delegate Rosenberg, if you could please unmute yourself.
I thought I was ready. Now I'm unmuted. Thank you. Good to be back in appropriations, especially when you're making decisions. And I hope you'll make a favorable decision on this bill. This bill is modeled on an initiative of the Biden-Harris administration. That is to address the inequities, environmental justice issues that we're now so much more aware of, to provide that 40% of the funding for environmental programs, certain environmental programs, will be spent in distressed communities, which have borne the brunt of environmental injustice. And what this bill would do is provide that, starting with fiscal year 23, because we can't do it, as you well know, for fiscal year 22, that the Department of the Environment, under the amendments that I'm submitting today, the Department of Environment would be principally responsible for ensuring that our allocation of certain state-funded programs that address climate change and energy conservation, and they are enumerated in the bill, and I can speak to them if you wish, that 40% of that money would be spent in distressed communities as defined in the bill. Bill is introduced. This would target our resources to try and redress the problems that we have created through inaction or action, by state actors or by private actors. But there's an awareness in the Biden administration, and we would replicate that with this bill to target our efforts to the communities where this environmental intervention is needed the most because of past inequities. The bill is introduced would have this done by the Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities. But as the session is worn on, and there have been other bills addressing that commission, I've become aware that they simply would be overburdened by all the things that legislation before us this session would have them undertake. So this bill would have, with the amendments that I'm offering today, would have this prioritization done by existing agencies where there are people who work full-time on these issues, who are responsible for the funding of these programs, and therefore would just simply have the simple but important additional responsibility of spending 40% of the money for these programs, the Small Minority and Women-Owned Business account, the Clean Energy Workforce account, Jane Lawton Conservation Loan Program, offshore wind, et cetera. Spend 40% of the money in distressed communities as it is defined under the bill. And I would, that summarizes what the bill as amended would do, and I would urge favorable action by the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delegate Rosenberg. And we have testimony from 2 witnesses today on the bill, and we'll hear testimonies from them. And to the witnesses, if you could limit your testimony 2 minutes, and then we will take questions from the committee. First, it's William Holohan with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, we have not seen him enter the waiting room.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wareheim. Next, we'll hear from Donald M. Goldberg, Climate Law and Policy Project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Donald Goldberg, Executive Director of Climate Law and Policy Project. I submitted written testimony in support of HB 1310 on behalf of my organization, Maryland League of Conservation Voters, Maryland Legislative Coalition, and the Unitarian Universalist Legislative Ministry of Maryland. The premise of HB 1310 is very simple. Maryland's low-income communities have not received their fair share of benefits provided by the state's clean energy and energy efficiency programs. Empower Maryland is illustrative. It achieves statewide efficiency improvements of 2% per year, but low-income households receive only a minuscule fraction of those benefits, despite paying into the program at the same rate as higher income households. This is especially unfair given that low-income households typically are the least energy efficient, have the worst indoor air quality, and pay the highest percentage of their income in energy costs, sometimes in excess of 30 to 40%. Speaking both as the head of an environmental organization and as a Maryland citizen, this is not acceptable. We are literally taking from the poor and giving to the rich. HB 1310 would provide a simple remedy by requiring the Department of the Environment to develop policies and recommendations that give highest priority to state and federal spending on clean energy and energy efficiency programs, projects, and investments that benefit low-income households. Simple fairness requires a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other witnesses here for House Bill 1310? At this time, the committee will take questions. The Delegate Krim is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Rosenberg, do you know anything about the Empower Maryland program?
Not offhand, no, I do not.
Well, it's a line item we all pay on our electric bills, and that was authorized through legislation. So you probably know what I'm talking about. So is there any requirement with that program to make sure that low-income people get money from that? Because, you know, that's used to reimburse people when they get efficient HVAC systems and new refrigerators, things like that. I don't think low-income people can necessarily afford that stuff. So that's why I'm asking.
Well, Bob Smith would know that better than I, and he's listening in. But more important point, if the committee wants to expand this prioritization that is at the heart of this bill to distressed communities, I'm all for it, because what you just said is the heart of the bill. We want to funnel more of the money we are spending to remediate clean energy and energy conservation problems in distressed communities. So that I would be fine, absolutely, and thank you.
Thank you. Joining us today, we also have members of the Economic Matters Committee. We have Delegate Pam Queen, Delegate Branch, and also Delegate Johnny Mounts. The committee will now hear a question from a member of the Economic Matters Committee, Delegate Pam Queen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Delegate Rosenberg, for this bill. I just have a question related to some of the informational testimony or letters from MEA and MDE, and they may have changed with some of your amendments. But one of the questions was raised about the use of funds. And as you alluded to, there's been a lot of changes we've been doing this session dealing with funding. Is the intent that since this would be a federal mandate or a federal program, that we might be getting federal funds and not have to use as much of our own state funds or a matching fund? I'm just worried about the MEA's comment about use of C funds. So any thoughts on that?
Well, I would certainly hope that we don't decrease our state funding, because the federal funding is not going to address the entire need that we have in these areas. So clearly my intent, and I don't think certainly the federal funds can come with strings attached, but they would not say the state can't spend more money than it is now. It wouldn't affect the level of state spending. So there certainly is no intent here to reduce state spending on these programs. It's to prioritize it, as you know. And I guess I would have to reread what we got from the state agencies, because the intent here is the federal money should complement what we're doing. It shouldn't be in place of. And we would have it in the budget. And I don't think this committee, or certainly the Appropriations Committee, is not intending to do that.
Okay. And MDE's comment was the need for additional staff. Any thoughts on that?
They should be able to decide with their own resources. They've got to spend the money as is. The only additional responsibility they have is identifying distressed communities. And within state government, we have the resources to establish, with the criteria in the bill, what are the distressed communities in our state. You don't need additional staff to do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Good question. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from members of the House Appropriations Committee or Economic Matters Committee regarding House Bill 1310? Seeing none, that ends the bill hearing for House Bill 1310. Have a great day. Next, we'll move to the last bill of today, which is House Bill 891, presented by Delegate D.M. Davis, Higher Education Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program established. Delegate Davis, thank you very much for being here. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and distinguished colleagues from Appropriations. My name is Deborah Davis from District 28 in Charles County. I'm excited to be the last bill of the day. I know I'm standing in between you and the weekend, but I'm excited to present HB 891, Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program. You heard this bill last year, and it's my belief that it was well received, but for the shortened session, it would have come out of your committee. I submit to you that you're going to hear testimony, oral testimony, and there's plenty of written testimony from college students, educators, and local leaders from across the state about food insecurity on our college campuses and why this program can make a difference. HB 891 merely sets up a program which gives colleges in Maryland an incentive to address hunger issues on campus, to not only raise awareness, but to set up the programs to address student hunger and food insecurity. We've made some changes since you last heard the bill, and you'll be glad to know that we've reduced the fiscal note to $150,000 by making it a matching grant program for the colleges. We've also made one, by working with MHEC and the colleges, we were able to make the SNAP requirement on campus to make it optional. So they can, the administrators at the campus can just refer students out to a SNAP program. Otherwise, the support for this bill, for this law has only grown since you last saw it. And there's lots of, and with no opposition. So thank you. And I respectfully request a favorable report on HB 891.
Thank you very much, Delegate Davis, for introducing the bill. Next, we'll hear testimony from individuals, and if the witnesses could limit their testimony to 2 minutes, please. First, we have Julia Gross with the Maryland Hunger Solutions. Thank you very much for being here. Please proceed when you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Julia Gross. I'm an anti-hunger program associate with Maryland Hunger Solutions. We are a statewide nonprofit, nonpartisan organization working to end hunger and improve nutrition and well-being of individuals, families in Maryland. As a state SNAP outreach partner, we've worked with college campuses across the state. So we know that hunger in higher education is a pervasive issue, and it's not new. It's something that we've seen even pre-COVID. Research has shown that food insecurity rates among college students are much higher than those of the average adult. And while many of the students that we've assisted with SNAP applications are working and actually do meet the requirements, the 20-hour-a-week work requirements, a lot of them are unaware of their eligibility because of the complicated regulations that are so difficult to navigate, which is why having these resources on campus like pantries and dedicated staff members who can help students navigate these applications, it's so critical and in some cases even life-saving. Students face a lot of different challenges, from balancing classes to jobs to internships, as well as caring for their own families. And we know that students aren't just 18-year-olds coming in from high school with the support of their families. We're talking about veterans, we're talking about parents who are raising their own children and helping them through school as they're taking night classes. We're talking about first-generation students and those with disabilities and mental health issues that might prevent them from working and having an income during school. And I don't want to forget about the low-income faculty and staff members that may also be struggling with food insecurity and benefit from these programs. We know Maryland's student body is diverse, and the campus community benefiting from these resources is also diverse. And so what it really comes down to is hungry students can't learn, and that's why we see this bill as a critical investment in Maryland's higher education system and our state's future. We don't believe that anyone should be deterred from achieving their educational dream because of hunger, and we don't want any students to suffer disproportionately from food insecurity because of their pursuit of higher education. So with that, I respectfully urge a favorable report on HB 891, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gross. Next, we'll hear testimony from Gianna Panaris.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you, Delegate Davis, for sponsoring the video. My name is Gianna Panaris. I am a student at Montgomery College, and I am here today to support this meeting because I don't want my son to stop pursuing dreams because of hunger. When I enrolled at Montgomery College back in 2018, I was happy to start my medical career, but my family's economic situation changed, and we didn't have money to buy food, to pay the rent, and we also had an eviction order, so I had to drop out of college. I don't want that for my son. If this would have been in place back then, I will probably be getting my associate degree as a surgeon in a few months. And thank you for your consideration. I support this bill again and look forward to a favorable report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Panaris. Next, we'll hear testimony from Gabrielle Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Gabrielle Wilson. I'm the campus pantry organizer at the University of Baltimore. I testified on behalf of this bill last year, so it's an honor to be back to speak to you all again. Education is still considered one of the best ways to lift oneself up among the ranks, and yet at the same time, when somebody's trying to obtain it, we always tell them, it's such a privilege. And that may be the case, but at the same time, when you're a student who is working 3 jobs and on top of a full course load, and surviving off of out-of-code sandwiches that you got from work that were supposed to go in the trash, which is something that happened to me when I was an undergrad. It's really weird to be told that, and I found that it begs a question. It's a privilege, but at what cost? And I really think that this mindset that we have is damaging to students. It ignores all the other factors in their lives and only focuses on the academics, not realizing that all of those other things can severely impact their ability to do as well as they can on their academics. And from my own personal experience, a lot of times it can feel like, as a student, I'm being hung out to dry in exchange for my tuition dollars. And just like the rest of us, students are human beings. And if you think about it, when you get up each day to come to work and to do your best, the security from having a full stomach and a roof over your head allows you to have the mental energy to go out and do those things. And we're asking students to, do all their best in their classes and do internships and join all of the clubs. And when they're hungry and they're trying to figure out how they're going to get their next meal or where they're going to sleep tonight, we don't factor that into it. And that's not fair to them. This bill is a huge chance to take a step in reversing that mindset and really showing our students that we care about all of them and all of their well-being in their pursuit of higher education. There are so many things that schools across the state have been doing, like campus pantries and emergency grant funds, and SNAP referrals and all those kinds of things that are great. And the funds from this program, as well as just the support of knowing that, this is coming from the state and from MHEC, will really strengthen and expand those programs. And because of that, I'm hoping that I'm urging a favorable reporting of House Bill 891 so that our students feel supported in their pursuit of knowledge and advancement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson. Next, we'll hear testimony from Odessa Davis with Manna Food.
Mr. Vice Chair, Manna, unfortunately, Odessa couldn't be here. Her work schedule changed, so Manna had reached out to me to just let you know her testimony was submitted written, just in case she couldn't make it with her work.
Thank you very much, Delegate Solomon. Next, we'll hear from Rachel Sumik with Swipe Out Hunger. Rachel Sumik with Swipe Out Hunger. Next, we'll hear.
I do not see Rachel in the room, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wareheim. Next, we'll hear from Caitlin Silver with Anne Arundel Community College.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for giving me the space to talk today. And thank you to Delegate Davis for sponsoring this bill. My name is Caitlin Silver, and I serve as the Basic Needs Coordinator at Anne Arundel Community College, or AACC. Through this role, I oversee our pantry operations and manage day-to-day service to students in meeting their basic needs. Since 2010, we've had this pantry exist at AACC's campus in order to meet the immediate needs of our students. Food insecurity is something that we've seen grow exponentially during the pandemic, but something that's existed since long before and will continue to exist long after. It's important to note that food insecurity is not just a lack of access to food in general. It can also be a lack of access to nutritious food or food variety. So while the trope of college students eating ramen for every meal might be something that we like to joke about in our society, it's actually not a good thing. Students deserve to have access to food that will serve them well and keep them energized to get through their day as the holistic individuals that they are, attending class, working in jobs, often caretaking for children or parents, and so forth. The 16 community colleges in Maryland alone represent currently 380,000 of Maryland college students. However, in a typical non-pandemic year, they represent 500,000. This is a large portion of the population, and we recognize that there's an extremely high need for support of food insecurity. This year alone, Anne Arundel Community College has provided 30,000 pounds of food to students and their families. We've seen an increase of approximately 200% in requests for assistance in meeting basic needs of our students during COVID. However, again, these numbers have existed and been consistent since prior to the pandemic even becoming a factor. Students are people first. They have holistic needs and they bring their entire selves to the campus that they attend. This means that they exist outside of the classroom, and providing food is a critical part of supporting them, again, as holistic individuals that they are. While the pandemic has exacerbated this need, it's always existed. It's just been brought to the forefront of our attention now more than ever because the nation is talking about it finally. Even as we begin to recover from the pandemic, we recognize that our students will continue to suffer financially because it's not like one paycheck is going to fix the full year of struggle that they faced. Funding like this will be absolutely critical in meeting the needs of our students and ultimately contributing to degree completion. Anecdotally speaking, I've had students reach out to me to say that they were able to complete an online test, paper, etc., without having to worry about their stomach grumbling while they work.
Thank you, Ms. Silver. If you could please summarize.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for your time. And we're just so grateful that this is even being discussed. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We have Dan Alpert with the University of Maryland Student Government Association. Dan Alpert. This time, the committee will take questions. Are there any questions from the Appropriations Committee regarding House Bill 891? Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Davis, I'm really happy that you brought this bill back again. Thank you for raising this really critical issue. Just a procedural question. I noticed the university system had favorable with amendments. Didn't know if you already have amendments drafted or if you've talked to them at all about clarifying some of the issues they've raised, but would be happy to work with you if you don't already.
I do not. I just found out today that there were some amendments, but I would love to work with you and we have been working with them and several other colleges.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee with the bill sponsor for the witnesses? If I may have a couple questions. This is addressed to the University of Baltimore and also the Anne Arundel Community College regarding metrics. Wondering from both institutions for pantries, are there any numbers as far as how many students or families are served in a semester or a year? Ms. Silver.
Absolutely. So this year we're serving about 55 students and families per week. So you can imagine, yeah, it's a big number. I see your eyebrows went up when I said it. In a typical year, it is slightly lower, but you can still expect that we're seeing, roughly 100 students every other week in some capacity, whether it's stopping by to get a snack when we're in person or now, requesting full meals to get through the week.
And where's the Anne Arundel Community College pantry located on campus?
So we have a couple of locations on campus. We have one in our Arnold campus in the Student Union, one at the Glen Burnie campus up on the second floor, and one at our Arundel Mills campus, kind of housed right behind where the admission space is there.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silver. Ms. Wilson, are there any metrics available for University of Baltimore you can share?
Yeah, our pantry actually has not been open since this week last year. We have been closed this entire time, unfortunately. And are currently trying to work out what that return to campus will look like possibly by the end of the semester, which would be great. But prior to the pandemic, we served about 120 or so people every month. Sometimes it'd be higher, sometimes a little bit lower, but that was about the average.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson. Are there any other questions from members of the House Appropriations Committee, the bill sponsor, or to the witnesses? Seeing none, that ends the bill hearing for House Bill 891.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Also, that ends the bill hearing for today on the behalf of House Appropriations Committee Chairwoman Maggie McIntosh. Everyone have a great weekend. Thanks for your work this week.